Chapter 726, Radiant Saint Master Badges. The youth was Jian Chen. Uncle Xiao's arrival had completely changed Jian Chen's original plans. Right now, he had already foregone his identity as a fighter, and was ready to go to the City of God and join the Radiant Saint Master Union to become a core member under a different identity. Fortunately, fighters who were also Radiant Saint Masters never appeared on the Tianyuan continent, which provided Jian Chen an additional layer of protection. Jian Chen did not pay any attention to the small white tiger perched on his head. He also stared into the distance at the vague city wall with great curiosity and mumbled to himself, "So is that one of the 7 capitals of the Tianyuan continent? It really is big. And from the great twisted city walls, I actually can feel a presence that originates from the ancient times. It's so vast that it even makes me feel pressured." "Hee, esteemed Radiant Saint Master, this must be the first time you've come to the City of God. Your understanding of the city is not as great as us, the natives. It's said that the 7 capitals of the continent originate from the ancient times, and were forcefully pulled from the ground by powerful saint emperors. Not only is the city extremely sturdy, it also has the protection of a powerful but mysterious force. Its defensive capabilities are beyond imagination. They say that on the current continent, there is no one who can break through the defense of the 7 capitals. When the city guarding barrier is activated, even 9th heavenly layer saint kings can't enter it." A mercenary next to the horse driver on a magical beast said. He was an average-looking, middle-aged man. He seemed to be an honest man, as well as the captain of the small mercenary group. Although he was only an Earth Saint Master, he was a native, born and raised in the Holy Empire, so he had a deep understanding of the City of God. "Captain Hu Yun, are you saying that the 7 capital cities of the continent were plucked from the ground by peerless experts in the ancient times?" Jian Chen's interest was piqued as he asked the middle-aged man. In the depths of his eyes, there was also a vague silver of disbelief. Captain Hu Yun chuckled and said, "Yeah, this rumor is nothing secretive in our holy empire. Apparently, all the capitals of the Tianyuan continent were pulled from the ground, or in other words, grown from the ground, by several saint emperors when they used a great technique. Although it's been countless years since then, the 7 capitals still contain a powerful energy. The reinforced walls are basically unbreakable." Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath. He stared at the great, towering city wall as he approached it, and struggled to understand just how powerful the technique needed to be to pull the walls up from the ground. In the next part, the journey, no one said anything. Jian Chen sat in the luxurious carriage, and slowly traveled towards the City of God with the accompaniment of the mercenaries. The city walls were over 100 meters in height. They were snow-white and reflective like mirrors, with not a single crack in them. The entire city wall seemed to be carved from one rock, as if the world had created it. The snow-white walls actually reflected the sunlight, and created blurry beams of white light. It filled the place with a sense of sacredness. It was bustling around the 16 great gates of the city. Countless mercenaries and merchants traveled in both directions, while around the gates, there were many soldiers clad in pale, silver armor. They stared coldly at the people who constantly passed them. With every group that entered the city, they had to cough up a single, shiny gold coin as a fee. This was one of the methods of income for the 3 great clans of the Holy Empire. When Jian Chen passed through the city gates, he could not help but become stern. This was because he could clearly feel the extremely pure and great energy hidden within the city walls. This was the first time Jian Chen recognized that he was actually so insignificant, like a skiff floating in the vast ocean. Also, a powerful pressure encapsulated Jian Chen's entire spirit, which made him feel like he was fighting an invisible foe. Even the thought of resisting failed to cross his mind. Is this the power of saint emperors? Looks like the rumors are indeed true. The 7 capital cities of the continent really were pulled up from the ground by ancient saint emperors. Jian Chen thought to himself. He entered the City of God without any obstructions, before continuing for another 50 kilometers. Only then did Jianchen leave the carriage, but not before throwing a bag full of purple coins to Captain Hu Yun. He left soon after. Hu Yun looked at the bag full of glittering purple coins and was immediately astonished. He called out, "Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, it's not this much, you've given too much. Captain Hu Yun, your brothers are all tired from this journey. Just treat the remaining as a bonus to your brothers." Jianchen's voice sounded up ahead. He continued on his way without looking back, quickly disappearing into the large, bustling street. The streets of the City of God were extremely wide, they could fit several dozen carriages side by side. Jianchen looked around as he walked through the streets, and looked upwards at the sky from time to time. Ever since he entered the City of God, he could clearly feel that the energy of the world was several more times abundant here than outside. Also, the more he approached the city center, the richer the energy became. Other than that, the radiant saint force in his surroundings was also several times more abundant than outside. If he wanted to use radiant saint force, Jianchen believed that he would only need a moment to reach his limit in gathering the energy. It could save him a lot of time for charging up. Apart from that, there were also plenty of powerful people in the City of God. A large portion of the pedestrians and mercenaries on the streets were Earth Saint Masters, and even Heaven Saint Masters were relatively common. It was extremely rare to find Radiant Saint Masters outside, yet they seemed to be extremely common here, present everywhere. Not only was the City of God, one of the 7 capitals of the continent, a place where Radiant Saint Masters gathered, but powerful people were also concentrated here. However, one aspect that piqued Jianchen's interest was that he saw many Radiant Saint Masters on the street, but they, without any exceptions, all wore a badge of varying color. There was brown, orange, yellow, green and so on. At this moment, the small tiger did not continue to sleep. It stood on Jianchen's shoulder while it lay on Jianchen's head. It had its head up, looking around with its pair of large, bright eyes, full of curiosity. Everything seemed to carry a freshness to it. At this moment, a series of uniform gallops could be heard in the distance. Several dozen people on magical beasts traveled towards Jianchen, and the people leading them were a male and a female who seemed to be in their 20s. The male wore azure robes and had a strong and sturdy stature. As for the female, she wore white robes and seemed rather charming. Her skin seemed soft like lamb fat, and she was rather pretty. She looked at the mercenaries and merchants on the 2 sides of the road with a slight disdain while she carried an expression that held a sliver of arrogance. When the girl inadvertently glanced towards Jianchen, she immediately saw the small tiger on Jianchen's shoulder. The pureness and brilliance of the tiger's gaze was immediately deeply ingrained in the girl's mind. "What a cute little animal!" the girl inadvertently exclaimed aloud. She looked at the tiger in interest, she struggled to conceal the affection on her face. The young man next to the girl also discovered the small tiger. He then turned to the girl and smiled, "Since sister likes it, brother'll buy it for sister as a gift." With that, the young man steered his magical beast mount to block Jianchen's path. He examined Jianchen and after discovering he was not a member of a large clan in the City of God, he immediately relaxed and said, "This brother, my sister is interested in your animal. Speak your price, I'll buy it." Although the young man bared a smile, his tone was extremely cold. He spoke to Jianchen as if he was commanding him. Jianchen furrowed his eyebrows. He did not even look at the young man and said coldly, "Not selling." With that, he made his way around the young man. The person's gaze grew cold. He turned around and stared at Jianchen's slender figure and said, "Looks like this brother is also a Radiant Saint Master, so why aren't you wearing the Radiant Saint Master badge?" Badge? Hearing the word, Jianchen immediately began thinking. Images of the different colored badges worn by the Radiant Saint Masters he saw on the street flashed through his head. Looks like this badge is distributed by the Union. It should be a symbol the status as a Radiant Saint Master. Jian Chen thought to himself. The girl in white robes arrived in front of Jian Chen on her class for magical beast with an arrogant expression. She sized up Jian Chen, but when she saw Jian Chen's appearance, she was slightly surprised. She said, "You look pretty handsome. With your stature and attire, you really do seem like a Radiant Saint Master. But you don't have the badge from the Radiant Saint Master Union, so you must have only awakened your ability as a Radiant Saint Master and haven't gone to the Union for identification yet. Whatever, even if you're just Class 1, or not even Class 1, I just happen to find you pleasing to the eye. If you offer up that cub to me as a gift, I'll make an exception and accept you as a male follower. As long as you follow me, I can teach you radiant arts." Jian Chen looked up and glanced at the girl who sat on the magical beast high up above. He saw that on the chest of the girl, there was actually a green badge. Jian Chen did not know what the different colored badges represented, but he did know that green badges were rather rare. In the 20-odd Radiant Saint Masters he had seen, only 2 or 3 people had green badges, while the rest all had brown, orange or yellow badges. "Apologies, I can't sell this little beast, much less offer it up as a gift." Jian Chen declined without any hesitation. Afterwards, he continued on his way without even looking back. "You really don't know how to appreciate things." The girl's complexion immediately became overcast. Chapter 727, Lin. By the young man's expression immediately changed. Instantly, his gaze became a glare and he said coldly, "Humph. Even a low-class Radiant Saint Master dares to be so arrogant. You really don't know what's good for you. I want to see what abilities you have to stop me from taking this beast cub." The young man leapt up, quickly and directly flew from his magical beast mount at Jian Chen. Like a lightning flash, his hand shot out toward the white tiger on Jian Chen's head. A sliver of cold light flashed across Jian Chen's eyes. The young man's actions had completely angered Jian Chen. However, Jian Chen did not react to him. He was now a Radiant Saint Master, so he definitely could not use his powers as a fighter in the public. Otherwise, his secret would just collapse on itself. The white tiger stared closely at the young man who had grabbed at it with its bright eyes. A look of mockery and disdain appeared in those intelligent-looking eyes. Just when the young man had arrived before the tiger, it suddenly opened its small mouth and bit one of the young man's fingers. The young man had never thought that the seemingly harmless beast cub would possess such great speed. So fast that even he was unable to react. As soon as his finger was bitten by the tiger cub, he immediately felt a strong sensation of pain. It caused the young man's expression to change greatly, before crying out painfully without any control. "Arg!" The young man gave out a miserable cry of pain. He actually retreated with a greater speed than he had arrived, and retreated to a distance over 10 meters away in the blink of an eye. He stared at the harmless-looking tiger cub on Jian Chen's head, still badly shaken. The young man bled from his right hand. His finger was broken by the small tiger's bite, causing his face to twist from the agony. The unbelievable scene attracted the attention of bystanders. They were all rather surprised and stared at the tiger cub. No one thought that such a harmless-looking tiger cub could actually bite and break a person's finger so quickly. Especially a great Saint Master's finger, which made it even more unbelievable. Just what is this magical beast? The young man forcefully suppressed the pain from his hand and cried out aloud as he stared at the tiger in shock. His calm mental state was no longer existent, because he actually failed to detect how the tiger cub had broken his finger with a bite. All he felt was an agonizing pain as soon as he grabbed the cub. Who would have thought that this cute tiger cub has such a powerful attack? Quite unexpected. The girl with the green Radiant Saint Master badge on the magical beast stared at the white tiger with even more interest. Her desire for the tiger cub became even stronger. The young man who had his finger broken stared at the white tiger with glimmering eyes before looking at Jian Chen. He said with a deep voice, "Sir, your tiger cub has broken my finger. Justice must be done for me, Lei Mingao. Leave your tiger cub behind, I'll take it to my Lei family. If so, I can forgive you for being disrespectful towards our Lei family." Jian Chen gently lifted the small tiger off of his head and gently rubbed its furry head as he carried it. He glared harshly at the young man, before he turned and left without saying another word. With Jian Chen's current identity, he just could not waste it all here and argue with the young man. If it were not for that fact that he could not use his strength as a fighter, he would have taught the arrogant young man a lesson long ago. Seeing how he was ignored by a mere low-class Radiant Saint Master, Lei Mingao was enraged. He stuck out his hand and pointed at Jian Chen, "Stop him. If justice is not done for me, Lei Mingao, today, none of you will dare leave. My finger cannot be broken for nothing." The dozen or so large men who rode behind Lei Mingao and the girl immediately steered their magical beasts and surrounded Jian Chen. Although Radiant Saint Masters possessed an extremely respectable status in the Holy Empire, the Lei family also possessed some strength in the City of God. A mere Radiant Saint Master who had not even been tested was viewed as nothing to the Lei family. "Take him down. We'll judge him in the Lei family later," Lei Mingao commanded. "Yes, sir." The dozen or so men replied simultaneously, before lunging at Jian Chen. However, just at this moment, a powerful voice resounded in the surroundings. "How dare you? Your Lei family actually dares to disrespect a Radiant Saint Master. Perhaps your Lei family is challenging the dignity of the Radiant Saint Master Union." The voice immediately stopped the several men from acting so rashly. Each of them stared towards the origin of the voice. Even Lei Mingo's expression changed greatly. There was dread in the depths of his eyes. The Radiant Saint Master Union was an extremely great force in the City of God, and even had connections with the three great clans that controlled the empire. They were an existence that could not be offended no matter what. A middle-aged man in white, long robes caused the crowd to split into two. He walked in with his head high and chest proud, and behind the middle-aged man, there were another two cold-looking middle-aged people. They gave off an icy cold presence and possessed the strength of Earth Saint Masters. Lei Mingao stared coldly at the middle-aged man. However, when he discovered the azure badge on the man's chest, his pupils constricted greatly. The girl on the magical beast also noticed the azure badge on the man's chest. Her expression changed slightly and groaned softly. She mumbled to herself with a voice only she could hear, "Aren't you just a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master? If you give me enough time, I can reach the same level as well." The Class 5 Radiant Saint Master looked around, before his gaze landed on the men who surrounded Jian Chen. He snorted and yelled loudly, "How dare you actually move against a Radiant Saint Master? Do you people want to taste the punishment from the Union? Hurry up and move away from me." The Class 5 Radiant Saint Master's loud voice immediately deterred the dozen or so large men from the Lei family. They immediately dispersed, and moved far away from Jian Chen without even making a sound. Lei Mingao stood to one side, unwilling to say another word. The depths of his gaze at the Class 5 Radiant Saint Master was filled with dread. Although Radiant Saint Masters were very fragile, their status in the Holy Empire was even greater than his, the third young master of the Lei family. Lei Mingao clenched his fist tightly and glared viciously at Jian Chen. He definitely would not let him off so easily for breaking his finger. The Class 5 Radiant Saint Master arrived in front of Jian Chen under the protection of the two Earth Saint Master. He immediately switched to a smile and said, "Looking at your attire, you must also be a Radiant Saint Master. So why haven't you gone and got yourself tested at the Union?" Jian Chen clasped his hands at the middle-aged man, "Thank you, sir, for helping me out. I was on my way to the Union to be tested, but who would have thought something so troublesome happened?" The Class 5 Radiant Saint Master clearly seemed extremely friendly. Even though Jian Chen seemed to be a low-class Radiant Saint Master in his eyes, he did not look down on him. He smiled, I'm Lin Bai. If you don't mind, you can call me Uncle Lin Bai. No matter what power you possess, as long as you are a Radiant Saint Master, you can enjoy good treatment wherever you are in the Holy Empire. You have the protection of the Radiant Saint Master Union in the City of God, so you don't have to fear bullies from clans. If they trouble you, you just need to report it to the Union. Thank you for Uncle Lin Bai's advice. Jian Chen clasped his hands. Brother, the Union's not far away and I just happen to have some spare time. Why don't I accompany you to the Union to get tested? Lin Bai said with a smile. Soon afterwards, Jian Chen left together with Lin Bai and the white tiger in his hands. All that was left was Lei Mingao, standing with an overcast expression as he watched Jian Chen disappear into the distance. Now that Jian Chen was with a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master, he would not dare to stop him even with all the courage in the world. Send 2 people to spy on that kiddo. Report back to me whenever. After ordering the group of guards behind him, he hurried away on his magical beast. His broken finger needed to be healed quickly, otherwise, it would become troublesome to heal after too much time. Fortunately, the injury this time was rather small and was not too difficult to heal. Jian Chen and Lin Bai walked towards the closest branch of the Radiant Saint Master Union and they talked along the way. Lin Bai spoke unceasingly to Jian Chen, and told him about some rules in the City of God as well as some problems encountered by Radiant Saint Masters. It allowed Jian Chen to gain an even better understanding of the City of God. The two walked around the road for an hour before finally arriving at a branch of the Union. Even though it was just a branch, it was rather grand. It was just a mere branch of the Union, yet the space it took up was in no aspect smaller than the Changyang Manor. At the main entrance of the Union, there were even a few Earth Saint Masters who stood there like statues, guarding the place. Chapter 728, Shock Jian Chen stood outside the main gate, and observed the branch of the Radiant Saint Master Union. From Lin Bai, not only did he learn that the Radiant Saint Master Union could provide authentication tests for all Radiant Saint Masters, it also provided lodging and food for free to all Radiant Saint Masters. In other words, not exaggerated in the slightest part, the branches of the Union were inns to Radiant Saint Masters. An extremely safe, special inn where no one could be harassed. Brother, you might still be rather unfamiliar here. Come with me, I'll take you to get your Radiant Saint Master class tested. The Union attaches great importance to every single Radiant Saint Master. If some high-class Radiant Saint Masters want to go out, the Union would even send experts to protect them at all times. Lin Bai explained with a smile as he took Jian Chen into the branch office. Lin Bai glanced at the 2 large, cold-looking men behind him and said rather complacently, Brother, you see the 2 people by me? They are the experts sent by the Union to protect me at all times. They're both 3rd Cycle Earth Saint Masters. Hearing that, Jian Chen turned around and glanced at the 2 men as a sliver of amazement flashed across his eyes. He originally thought that the 2 people were sent from Lin Bai's clan to protect him. He had never thought that the 2 Earth Saint Masters were sent by the Radiant Saint Master Union, which surprised him quite a lot. Looking at Jian Chen's expression, Lin Bai sniggered, this is the treatment a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master receives. When you reach Class 5 in the future, you too can enjoy treatment like this. As Lin Bai spoke, he led Jian Chen to a counter. On the old wooden chair behind the counter sat a gray-haired elderly man in white, long robes. The old man's eyes were currently tightly closed and he was asleep. His snores were thunderous, and on the chest on the elderly man there was an azure badge. The same color as Lin Bai's. Jamie, stop sleeping, you have things to do now. Lin Bai used his right hand to knock the counter heavily a few times, which gave out a few muffled knocks. Being awakened from his sweet dreams, the old man was enraged. Before he had even opened his eyes, he began to roar angrily, which ignorant brat dares to wake me, the esteemed Class 5 Radiant Saint Master Jamie, from his dreams? Are you tired of staying in the City of God? As soon as he completed his angry roar, the old man's angry eyes immediately landed on Lin Bai. He was slightly surprised, which he then laughed awkwardly. Rubbing his head, he said, "Lin Bai boy, it's actually you." It's nothing, it's nothing. I've been awoken from sweet dreams, but I can just have another one later." Lin Bai clearly had already gotten used to the old man's behavior. He extended a hand and pulled Jian Chen ahead. "Jamie, this person's a Radiant Saint Master, though he hasn't been tested. You're the vice manager of this branch, so you test him." Jamie glanced at Jian Chen, but he did not pay too much attention to him. He pulled out a piece of paper carelessly and began writing, "Lin Bai, this is the 28th you've brought. You really are kind-hearted and honest, always so kind and gentle from the bottom of your heart. Perhaps that's the reason why you've reached class 5 with your current age." Lin Bai smiled slightly, but he did not say anything. "Kid, what's your name? How old are you? Where did you come from and when did you realize you had the power to use Radiant Saint Force?" Jamie asked without even raising his head. Jian Chen naturally knew that he was asking him. He replied without any hesitation, "I'm Yang Yutian, 24 years old this year. I come from a rural village and accidentally discovered that I could control Radiant Saint Force when I was young." Jamie quickly recorded the information Jian Chen had provided him with before standing up. "Come with me, I'll get you tested for your ability as a Radiant Saint Master." Afterwards, Jian Chen followed Jamie into a secret room at the back of the branch office. As for Lin Bai and his 2 bodyguards, they also came in. The room was rather large and dark, but also empty. The only thing in there was a fist-sized white rock on a round table in the center of the room. It seemed like a night pearl, and glowed with a faint light. "Yang Yutian, use all you can to control your Radiant Saint Force and pour it all into that white rock," Jamie said indifferently. Jian Chen did not say anything in return. He slowly walked up to the white rock and after hesitating for a while, he slowly extended his right index finger. In just a second, a faint layer of white light appeared where Jian Chen's finger was, before quickly growing in brightness. Quickly it became a white ball of soft light. With the appearance of the ball of light, the darkness of the surrounding room disappeared. Jamie and Lin Bai's pupils constricted suddenly as they observed that. Jamie's originally uncaring old eyes immediately became to overflow with great vigor. "This kid gathers Radiant Saint Force so quickly," Jamie cried out. His expression became stern for the first time for the day. Lin Bai also stared at Jian Chen in surprise. He too had never thought that a mere low-class Radiant Saint Master like Jian Chen could actually gather Radiant Saint Force with such a speed. It had even exceeded his own speed, that of a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master. At this moment, Jian Chen suddenly poked the white rock in front of him. The Radiant Saint Force on the tip of his finger was immediately poured into the rock, and instantly, the rock began to glow with a dazzling light. At the very start, the light was red, then orange, before turning into yellow. "It's yellow. Yang Yutian from a rural village is actually a Class 3 Radiant Saint Master. A 24-year-old Radiant Saint Master, someone with talent like that definitely has a big future ahead of them. They'll at least reach Class 5, or even Class 6. Jamie stared in shock at the rock glowing with yellow light as he mumbled to himself. Shortly afterwards, the emotion of excitement emerged in his gaze. Suddenly, the yellow light quickly changed. It had already turned into a dark green in the next moment, glowing from the white rock. Class 4, he's actually Class 4. Jamie could no longer retain his composure. He cried out from the bottom of his heart and looked at Jian Chen with a gaze of disbelief. The way Lin Bai looked at Jian Chen also changed very greatly. At this moment, his heart was beating rapidly as he mumbled to himself, who would have thought that brother Yang Yutian is already Class 4 even though he's 24 years old. It's not any weaker compared to that treasured daughter from the Lei family. Talent this great should already place within the top 10 of the Holy Empire. The pupils of the two Earth Saint Masters standing beside Lin Bai also constricted abruptly as they stared at Jian Chen in shock. It was quite rare in the Holy Empire for a 24-year-old to reach Class 4. The two of them had seen many Radiant Saint Masters in their lives, yet those who had reached Class 4 were all people in their 40s or 50s without any exception. There were even people who had spent 70 or 80 years to reach such a level. A Class 4 Radiant Saint Master. Ha ha ha, who would have thought that Yang Yutian is actually Class 4, and that in my tiny third-rate branch office, there would be a 24-year-old Class 4 Radiant Saint Master. Jamie was so excited that he could not control himself anymore, giving out a crazy laugh. At this moment, a quiet crack sounded in the room. A tiny crack had appeared on the white rock which was used to test Radiant Saint force, before quickly spreading all over the rock with an unbelievable speed. The originally undamaged rock was now covered with spider-web cracks. Afterwards, there was a boom, and the entire piece of rock suddenly exploded, scattering shrapnel all over the ground. Jamie's laughter came to a screeching stop. He suddenly became stupefied, staring blankly at the floor of broken rock. Disbelief flooded his eyes. Lin Bai also stood there blankly. His mouth was wide open while his eyes had become the size of bells. He said trembling, Class 5. Impossible, Yang Yutian is only 24. How can he reach Class 5? A 24-year-old Class 5 Radiant Saint Master. Geez, that hasn't appeared for thousands of years. Jamie mumbled to himself at a loss. He was unable to believe what was occurring before his eyes. Lin Bai's breathing became labored. He abruptly swung his head to look at Jamie and said hurriedly, Jamie, what are you staring for? Hurry up and take Yang Yutian to the main office to get him tested as a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master. This would be a great service to you, a vice manager of a third-rate branch. Jamie jerked suddenly. He immediately returned to his sentences and said extremely hurriedly, Yeah, Yang Yutian, quickly come with me to get tested for Class 5 at the main office. At that moment, Jamie, a feeble Radiant Saint Master, actually possessed the speed of a fighter. He shot in front of Jian Chen like an arrow, before pulling Jian Chen by the arm towards outside. Afterwards, Lin Bai followed closely behind Jamie with his two bodyguards. In the City of God, a luxurious carriage bearing the symbol of the Radiant Saint Master Union currently galloped down the streets hurriedly, while beside the carriage, there were a dozen or so muscly men escorting it on Class 4 magical beasts. Even more so, there were a few large men ahead, hurrying their mounts to open up a path, constantly calling out at the pedestrians. It piqued the interests of many people, which caused them to discuss about it on the sides. Within the City of God, one of the 7 capitals of the continent, only the clan in control of the City of God and the Radiant Saint Master Union dared to rampage down the streets without any worry. Within the carriage, Jian Chen sat comfortably on a soft seat, while he held the snow-white tiger in his hands. As for Lin Bai and Jamie, they sat excitedly on Jian Chen's two sides, all filled with anticipation. When they looked at Jian Chen, their gazes were extremely complicated. A 24-year-old Class 5 Radiant Saint Master was a rare genius even over several millennia. Chapter 729, Blue Badge, 1. Just as Jian Chen took the carriage with Jamie towards the main office of the Radiant Saint Master Union, a white-robed old man who seemed to be in his 70s in a luxurious courtyard slowly allowed the dense Radiant Saint force around his hands to dissipate. On the old man's chest was an exquisite blue badge. The blue badge represented a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master and was distributed by the main office of the Union. Only Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters had the right to wear it, so the old man clearly was a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Before the old man sat Lei Mingao, the person who had fallen out with Jian Chen before having his finger broken by the small white tiger. He was currently moving his right index finger, which had just been healed. Mingao, fortunately you rushed back to the clan in time. Otherwise, the wound would begin to coagulate if too much time passed. Then, even I won't have the power to fix it. Only the elders of the Union would possess that power. The Class 6 Radiant Saint Master said to him with no expression. Lei Mingao stood up from the seat. He bowed courteously to the old man and said, "Thank you, third grandfather, for healing Mingo's finger. Mingao will never forget third grandfather's deed." The Class 6 Radiant Saint Master sighed, "Mingao, although our Lei family has some status in the City of God, we aren't all powerful. There are plenty of clans greater than our Lei family in the city. You shouldn't cause so much trouble. Mingao will take third grandfather's wisdom to the heart." Before the old man, Lei Mingao did not dare to be brash. His third grandfather was the only Class 6 Radiant Saint Master of the family after all, as well as a core member of the Radiant Saint Master Union. He possessed an extremely great status. The Radiant Saint Master nodded before leaving the room wearily. As soon as he left, the expression of respect on Lei Mingo's face disappeared. He became overcast as he grinded his teeth. "Even a mere low-class Radiant Saint Master dares to be so brash before me, and he even broke a finger of mine. If I don't take revenge, do I still have any dignity to face the Lei family anymore? Brother, your sister likes the tiger cub that the low-class Radiant Saint Master owns very much. You have to bring it back for your sister." As soon as Lei Mingao finished speaking, a female's voice echoed from outside. A lady with a green Radiant Saint Master badge walked in. She carried an expression of great arrogance. Seeing the lady, Lei Mingao immediately began to smile. "Sister, don't worry. Your brother will definitely bring back that tiger cub. Brother'll give it to you as a gift." Towards his younger cousin, Lei Mingao did not dare to be impolite. His cousin's status in the family was extremely special, and was much greater than his status as the third young master. This was because his cousin was extremely talented, reaching Class 4 as a Radiant Saint Master when she was 23 years old. She became one of the most outstanding 10 geniuses of the City of God and bared the high hopes of the elders of the family. She was even praised by an elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union that she would definitely reach Class 6 in another 20 years, and might even possess the potential to reach Class 7. As a result, even though his younger cousin was not a member of the direct line of descent, she possessed a status that completely superseded him, the third young master. This is due to the fact that all Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters would take up the position of an elder of the Union, which was an extremely great status. Even in the entire Union, there were only around 20 elders who had reached Class 7. At this moment, a guard that Lei Mingao had sent to stalk Jian Chen hurried in. He knelt on one knee and said, reporting to the young master, "The low-class Radiant Saint Master is currently leaving in a carriage along with the vice-manager of a third-rate branch." Looking at their direction, they seemed to be hurrying towards the main office of the Union. Hearing that, Lei Mingao furrowed his eyebrows. After a period of thought, he mumbled to himself, "What's he going to the head office of the Union for?" At this moment, the green-badged lady pondered slightly and said to herself, "That low-class Radiant Saint Master seemed to want to go and get tested. The third-rate branch on Sun Street can only test up the Class 4. Once it exceeds Class 4, they need to go to the main office to be tested. Perhaps that untested Radiant Saint Master is already Class 5? As soon as he heard Class 5, Lei Mingo's expression changed. He said dramatically, "Impossible, that's definitely impossible. He looks even younger than me. How can he be a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master?" The lady thought for a while with furrowed eyebrows. Afterwards, she looked coldly towards the guard and said, "Quickly prepare a carriage, I need to go to the head office." "Yes, young lady Lei Yin." The guard replied courteously before rushing off. The female who was referred to as young lady Lei Yin did not hesitate either, leaving immediately. Lei Mingao hesitated slightly as he watched Lei Yin slowly disappear into the distance. With gritted teeth, he immediately began to chase after her. "Sister, wait for brother." I'll come with you. The city of God was extremely large. The luxurious carriage rolled down the wide streets quickly, finally arriving at the center of the city after a whole day and night of travel. It finally came to a stop in front of a grand castle. The castle was the main office of the Radiant Saint Master Union. The castle was extremely big, at least 100 meters in height. The entire castle radiated with a layer of soft white light, carrying with it a holy feeling, and even more so, the pure beauty of sacredness. However, the most eye-catching part was the very top of the castle. There was a ball of light around 10 meters in diameter, completely condensed out a radiant Saint Master. It did not disperse and seemed to be everlasting. As soon as Jianchen exited the carriage, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. His gaze immediately landed on the ball of dense radiant saint force and he was unable to look away. He could feel that the ball of light contained vast radiant saint force, and that the force was so powerful, it was enough to stupefy Jianchen for a while. At this moment, Jamie and Lin Bai exited the carriage rather wearily together. Their gazes also landed on the ball of light at the top of the castle. That's the symbol of the Radiant Saint Master Union. In the very center of that ball of dense Radiant Saint Force is the only Saint artifact that allows Radiant Saint Masters to reach Class 7. It's activated every 50 years, and every time it's activated, only 10 people can enter and obtain the opportunity to reach Class 7. There is only 1 year, 5 months and 18 days till the next activation. Jamie explained to Jianchen on one side. This was not a secret in the Holy Empire. Almost all Radiant Saint Masters knew about it. Jianchen stared deeply into the powerful ball of Radiant Saint Force on the top of the castle. Although it contained the Saint artifact that allowed people to reach Class 7, he was unable to see it at all. The dense Radiant Saint Force was just too powerful, and there was also an extremely powerful seal outside protecting it. Even his presence could not get through it. Who would have thought that the Union would actually place something so valuable there? Looks like they've made plenty of preparations for the safety of the artifact and that they don't fear anyone taking it away. Jianchen thought. He forcefully suppressed the unrealistic thoughts that had blossomed in his mind, before following Jamie and Lin Bai into the castle. Jamie brought Jianchen into the huge castle. Within the castle, there were many Radiant Saint Masters in white robes with varying badge colors, gathered together in small groups and conversing. Jianchen followed Jamie to a counter. Behind the counter sat an old man who also wore an azure badge. Jamie, you old debauchee, what are you coming to the Union headquarters for and not staying in your branch? Perhaps you've got a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master to test. Gether, you've actually guessed correctly. I've indeed come this time to have someone tested for Class 5. Jamie chuckled. Gether focused his gaze and looked attentively at Lin Bai. He thought in surprise, perhaps this youngster's already reached Class 6. He doesn't even seem to be 50 years old. This is just unbelievable for him to reach Class 6 with such a young age. He actually cultivates several times faster than fighters. Although he was secretly shocked, Gether did not hesitate. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go, I'll take you to get tested." Not long after, Jianchen and the others followed Gether into a secret room. Gether pulled out a thumb-sized bead from a decorated box in the room, before arriving before Lin Bai sternly. He said, "Since you've passed the Class 5 test already, you should already know the rules. I guess I don't need to say any more." Chapter 730, Blue Badge, 2. Gether did not hand the item for testing Radiant Saint Masters to Jianchen. Instead, he gave it to the Class 5 Radiant Saint Master Lin Bai who had the Azure Badge. To him, there was no doubt that Lin Bai was the person who needed to be tested. He knew just how great Lin Bai's talent was. As for his friend of several decades, he did not even think about Jamie. He knew Jamie very well. Although Jamie possessed decent talent, he had only become a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master 2 years ago. It was definitely impossible for him to have a breakthrough again and reach Class 6 so soon. As for Jian Chen, he was always ignored by Gether. Jian Chen was just too young, and Gether had even believed Jian Chen was perhaps Lin Bai's disciple. Gether's actions caused both Lin Bai and Jamie to stare blankly. A sliver of astoundment had even appeared on Jian Chen's face, but shortly afterwards, they all revealed a bitter smile. They all understood that Gether misunderstood who needed to be tested. The scene had even caused the two Cold Earth Saint Masters behind Lin Bai to reveal a rarely seen smile of interest. When Gether saw the people's weird expressions, Gether was immediately flooded by a sense of doubt. He stared at Lin Bai in astonishment and asked, "Isn't the person who needs to be tested you?" Lin Bai shook his head with a bitter smile. "I'm only 45 this year and I only reached Class 5 half a year ago. How is it possible for me to make another breakthrough in just half a year? Sir, you overestimate me." Hearing that, Gether became embarrassed. There were many people in the union responsible for testing, and Gether was one of them. Lin Bai's testing for Class 5 was indeed held at the headquarters, but the person who tested him was not Gether. As a result, Gether did not know about the finer details. Gether then looked towards his good friend of many years, bearing an expression of slight admiration. Even though he struggled to believe it, he had to accept the fact that his good friend was now a step ahead of himself. "Congratulations, Jamie. Who would have thought that you'd make another breakthrough in just 2 years? Now that you're a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, you have the right to become a core member of the Union and learn Radiant Arts. Though, I still don't possess the right to hold tests for Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. The tests for Class 6 must be held by elders. Just wait here, I'll immediately go and contact an elder." A jade trinket had already appeared in Gether's hand. He contacted the elders using a special method. Jamie immediately extended his hand to stop Gether. He looked at him, unsure of how to react. "Gether, you really are befuddled. You haven't even asked us who is taking the test and just personally decided that it was Lin Bai or me who had reached Class 6. Jamie took a slight step backwards. He pulled Jian Chen in front of him, into Gether's astounded gaze. He said proudly, "This is Brother Yang Yutian. His talent is extremely great and already possesses quite a great achievement despite being only 24 years old. When he came to my branch to be tested, his dense Radiant Saint force actually destroyed the testing rock. Although he's quite young, he's already a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master. This was why I came to the Union from far away, to have Yang Yutian tested for Class 5. Gether, do you finally understand, you befuddled old man? This time, the person to be tested is not me or Lin Bai, but him." "What? The person to be tested is him? He's already reached Class 5? Gether was greatly stunned as he looked at Jian Chen in disbelief. Although 24-year-old Class 5 Radiant Saint Masters had appeared on the continent before, they were extremely rare. It had already been several millennia since such a young, high-class Radiant Saint Master had appeared. Jamie chuckled complacently and said, "Of course, Gether. Do you think that a Class 4 Radiant Saint Master can destroy my testing rock? Whatever, let's cut to the chase and quickly get Brother Yang Yutian tested. I can't wait any moment longer." Gether's gaze towards Jian Chen was already completely different. He sucked in a deep breath, slowly calming himself. Afterwards, he passed the thumb-sized bead to Jian Chen. "The test for Class 5 can start now. Yang Yutian, please pour as much Radiant Saint force as you can into the bead. As long as you get the bead to glow with azure light, you are a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master. Though, I must warn you that the bead had a great repelling force towards Radiant Saint force. Pouring Radiant Saint force into it is extremely tiring, so you must give it your all." Jian Chen nodded as he took the bead from Gether. With a thought, he immediately began to condense the surrounding Radiant Saint force, before shortly pouring it into the bead. However, just when Jian Chen's Radiant Saint force approached the bead, it was met with resistance, preventing the Radiant Saint force from entering the bead. Gether, Lin Bai, and Jamie all stared fixedly at Jian Chen. Whether Jian Chen was a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master all depended on this step. A sneer of disdain formed on Jian Chen's lips. With a soft snort, his thought of controlling the Radiant Saint force abruptly increased by quite a lot. The Radiant Saint force in the surroundings immediately began to quickly gather around Jian Chen, before being forcefully channeled into the bead by Jian Chen. The ordinary-looking bead immediately began to glow with red light. Shortly afterwards, it began to change, going from the original red to orange, then to yellow, before finally turning to green. Gether's heartbeat began to quicken as he stared at the bead that was flashing green, his hands already tightly clenched. Lin Bai and Jamie were the same as him. Although Jian Chen demonstrated power beyond Class 4 by destroying the testing rock, it did not mean that Jian Chen was a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master and only meant he possessed the power of a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master. Whether he really was Class 5 or not would still depend on the test. In the past, there were many people who took the Class 5 test who could make the testing rock explode, but were unable to pour Radiant Saint force into the bead, or were unable to make the bead glow azure. As a result, they remained Class 4 Radiant Saint Masters. To Lin Bai and Jamie, although Jian Chen possessed the power of a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master, he was still not truly Class 5. As a result, as Jian Chen took the test, the two of them observed very attentively, along with some anticipation. At this moment, the green light from the bead jerked. Shortly afterwards, azure light immediately began to spill from the bead, completely replacing the green light. Class 5. Brother Yang Yutian is actually a real Class 5 Radiant Saint Master. Jamie danced about excitedly. It was he who had discovered the genius, as well as he who had escorted the genius to the headquarters to be tested. This was a great meritorious service. Congratulations, Brother Yang Yutian. You've become a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master, an existence respected by tens of thousands. Lin Bai also revealed a smile from the bottom of his heart and he hurried to clasp his hands at Jian Chen in congratulation. Gether wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. He looked at Jian Chen in admiration and envy. Yang Yutian, congratulations on become the most outstanding Class 5 Radiant Saint Master of the continent in thousands of years. I hope you can keep up the good work and quickly reach Class 6 and become a core member of the Union, as well as learn Radiant Arts. Before Gether had even finished, he came to a screeching halt. His eyes suddenly began to bulge and he stared at the bead in Jian Chen's hand in disbelief. He only saw the azure light of the bead quickly deepen at a rate visible with the naked eye. It turned more and more blue and in a few breaths, the azure light was completely replaced with navy light. Blue, this, how is this possible? No, impossible, this is definitely impossible. It's impossible. Gether's eyes became the size of bells. He started at the navy blue bead tongue-tied. He was completely overwhelmed with disbelief. Blue light, how can this happen? This is the blue light that symbolizes a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Lin Bai was absolutely astounded, no longer able to maintain his calm with the storm brewing in his heart. Jamie was also stunned by what he had just seen. He forcefully rubbed his eyes and said with a mouthful, impossible, why would it shine with blue light? I must be seeing wrong. Yes, I must be seeing wrong. However, no matter how forcefully Jamie rubbed his eyes, the light remained a deep navy blue, not the azure he had believed. Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Yang Yutian is actually a Class 6 Radiant Master. A 26-year-old Radiant Saint Master. Heavens! Gether became a little lost. The shock in his heart had already reached a level that could not be recovered from easily. He believed that at this very moment, he had just witnessed a miracle, an unprecedented miracle. It was not that 24-year-old Class 5 Radiant Saint Masters never appeared on the Tianyuan continent, they only appeared every several millennia. As for a 24-year-old Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, that was a miraculous existence Gether had never even heard of. Even in all of history, a 24-year-old Class 6 Radiant Saint Master had never appeared. Oh my heavens, a 24-year-old Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters actually appeared. This is just unbelievable. Let me contact the elders immediately. Gether immediately shot off with a speed even he did not know he could travel at, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Chapter 731, Blue Badge, 3, a 24-year-old Class 6 Radiant Saint Master was just too astounding. As a result, Gether's act of calling the elders could be regarded as extremely quick. Very soon, a series of rapid steps could be heard outside the testing room. Two ruddy old men in luxurious robes rushed in from outside, who beared an exquisitely crafted purple badge on their chests. As for Gether, he followed behind the two old men with an expression of courtesy. Within his eyes, there was respect that originated from the bottom of his heart. It was extremely clear that the two old men possessed quite a great status in the Union. As soon as they entered the secret room, Gether arrived before Jian Chen quickly and said courteously, "Esteemed elder, this brother is Yang Yutian. He is the brother Yang Yutian that I spoke of earlier, who has reached Class 6 despite being only 24. The two elders stared at Jian Chen with great interest. There was excitement in their eyes that they struggled to conceal, while one of them said hurriedly with a rather husky voice, "Quick, use all you've got and channel Radiant Saint Force into the Saint Bead." Jian Chen understood that the Saint Bead the elder referred to was the bead in his hands. Shortly afterwards, without any hesitation, he began to forcefully pour Radiant Saint Force from the world into the bead with a thought. In that moment, Jian Chen did not hold back at all. This was because if he wanted to obtain the opportunity to become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master, he needed to display his great talent and powerful ability. By totally astounding the elders of the Radiant Saint Master Union elders, his possibility of reaching Class 7 would increase. As a result, Jian Chen completely dropped his low-key behavior, displaying himself intentionally for the first time. With Jian Chen giving his all, the Radiant Saint Force in the surrounding space quickly began to coalesce with an unbelievable speed. Afterwards, under Jian Chen's absolute control, it was forced into the Radiant Bead. The Saint Bead immediately began to glow with dazzling light. It changed rapidly from the original red, actually leaping through orange, yellow, green, azure before arriving at blue in just 2 breaths. The speed was actually several times faster than the first time he took the test. The rapidly changing color caused Lin Bai and Gether to suck in a breath of cold air. They could not help but cry out, "What precise control! Even Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters don't have such great control." Good, you've actually reached Class 6, with your ability to control Radiant Saint Force extremely close to Class 7. Great, our Radiant Saint Master Union now has an unprecedented genius. Ha 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 ha. One of the elders laughed from the bottom of his heart. He was extremely excited. "Child, tell me honestly how old you are." The other elder asked with his husky voice as he stared fixedly at Jian Chen. Although his expression was rather calm, his slightly trembling body gave away just exactly how excited the old man was in his heart. "Esteemed elder, I am 24 this year," Jian Chen said courteously as he clasped his hands at the elder. The Radiant Saint Master Union used the 7 colors, red, orange, yellow, green, azure, blue and purple, to categorize Radiant Saint Masters. As for the two elders, they had purple badges on their chests, so Jian Chen had already deduced the fact that they were Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. Even with the entire continent in respect, Class 7 Radiant Saint Master were not plentiful. There were definitely fewer than 50 of them, but almost all the Radiant Saint Masters at such a level gathered in the City of God. As a result, it was of no surprise that Jian Chen could see two of them at the same time. Good, good, good. Child, you're pretty good. You're the most outstanding genius of our Radiant Saint Master Union, the most dazzling person of the Union. You will definitely become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master in the future and become one of the elders of the Union. Child, come with us first, we'll take you to the second test. As the husky old man spoke, he pulled Jian Chen outside by the arm. Esteemed elder, there's a second test? Jian Chen asked curiously. He revealed an expression of doubt. The old man nodded with a smile. He looked at Jian Chen as if he was staring at a huge treasure and said kindly, Child, you can call me the 9th elder. The one beside me in the 14th elder. As for the second test, it's only something that Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters can go through. It's used to test how talented the Radiant Saint Master is for Radiant Arts. Since you've already reached Class 6, you naturally have to take the second test. After you finish the test, you're allowed to learn any of the Radiant Arts the Union has collected. Radiant Arts? Jian Chen mumbled to himself. He had heard about these Radiant Arts before, from the Radiant Saint Master girl of the Lei family. He had actually heard it again here, which caused him to involuntarily feel extremely curious as to what Radiant Arts were. The 9th and 14th elder did not give any explanations on Radiant Arts. They only pulled Jian Chen along as they went outside. What are you kids doing? You can't enter the grounds of the second test. Wait till you reach Class 6. Just when Lin Bai and Jamie intended to follow in, they heard the 14th elders lecturing. Helplessly, the two were filled with regret and could only stop there. Jian Chen followed the 9th and 14th elder through an impressive corridor. They went directly to the second floor, passing by many Radiant Saint Masters of differing levels. All the Radiant Saint Masters bowed and greeted the two elders without any exceptions, before all staring curiously and doubtfully at Jian Chen. Weird, just who is this younger? How is he able to be so close to these two esteemed elders? Many Radiant Saint Masters mumbled to themselves. As the two elders lead the way, they talked with Jian Chen. They constantly asked questions about Jian Chen's origins as well as how he was able to reach Class 6 despite being so young. However, they were all answered with Jian Chen's false information that he had prepared beforehand. A stick of incense later, Jian Chen followed the two elders into a secret room. The room was extremely large and rather empty, with no one else except for Jian Chen and the two elders. High up, there was a layer of white fog moving about. It did not disperse, giving off a sacred light which illuminated the room. Child, this is the place where the second test for Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters is held. It's constructed from several Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters of the Union along with a few powerful Saint Rulers. The ceiling of the room is condensed from the most pure Radiant Saint force in the world by the Radiant Saint Masters, before forcefully compressed into fog. Afterwards, a few Saint Rulers work together to create a powerful and special barrier to lock in the Radiant Saint force, allowing the Radiant Saint force to never disperse and last for an extremely great time. Child, you only need to do your best and try draw the Radiant Saint force from the bindings of the barrier. The 9th elder said softly to Jian Chen. Yang Yutian, this test is extremely crucial. It tests your talent in practicing Radiant Arts. Radiant Arts are the only method where Radiant Saint Master can attack, so its importance to Radiant Saint Masters is self-evident. You must do your best. The 14th elder said sternly. Jian Chen's eyes became lit. He nodded solemnly, before slowly closing his eyes, standing there unmoving. The 9th and 14th elder also looked away from Jian Chen, directing their gazes at the dense Radiant Saint force at the ceiling of the room. Suddenly, the barrier close to the ceiling of the room began to ripple violently. Shortly after, the Radiant Saint force fog sealed within began to move slowly. Gradually, the movement became more and more violent, while the ripples spread further and further out. Very soon, all the radiant saint force sealed within the barrier began to ripple violently. Seeing that, the 9th and 14th elder furrowed their brows at the same time as they thought, this Yang Yutian is just too reckless. He really does carry the brashness of young people, not looking into the mysteries of the barrier beforehand and instead just going at all the radiant saint force. The barrier is not just for protecting the radiant saint force from dispersing. The real test comes later. Jian Chen was a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master after all. Along with the fact that his presence was innately powerful and that he had fused with the sword spirits, he could control all the Radiant Saint force within the barrier without much effort at all. Afterwards, he immediately tried to get the Radiant Saint force he controlled to break free from the bindings of the barrier and gather before him. However, just when the Radiant Saint force approached the barrier immediately gave off a great resistance to prevent the Radiant Saint force from leaving. It forcefully locked the Radiant Saint force inside. A sneer curled up at the corner of Jian Chen's lips. He immediately increased his power before gritting his teeth. He actually managed to forcefully pull a strand of Radiant Saint force from the barrier, but in the next moment, a powerful suction suddenly appeared in the barrier, actually sucking the strand of Radiant Saint force back towards itself. Jian Chen became stern. He understood that this was the true test, so he did not attempt to hold back anymore. He increased his control of the Radiant Saint force through his presence once again, slowly drawing and coalescing the Radiant Saint force in front of him against the powerful suction of the barrier. The Radiant Saint force sealed in the barrier of the room was slowly and forcefully drawn out by Jian Chen. Radiant Saint force gathering before Jian Chen gradually became more and more powerful, while the white light given off became more and more dazzling. In the end, it seemed to be like the sun, glowing with light that could illuminate the world. The 9th and 14th elder both witnessed it with bulging eyes and expressions of disbelief. What Jian Chen had done was just too astounding. It was already an extremely difficult task for normal Class 6 Radiant Saint Master to draw a small portion of Radiant Saint force from the barrier, yet Jian Chen had pulled out close to half of all the Radiant Saint force within the barrier. They found it extremely inconceivable because the more Radiant Saint force was drawn out, the stronger the suction of the barrier became. It was bewildering how Jian Chen, a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, had drawn 40% of the Radiant Saint force from the barrier. A prodigy, he really is a prodigy. This kid was basically born powerful. The 14th elder could not help but sigh emotionally. The 9th elder did not say anything. Though, he had pulled out a jade pendant from his clothes and inserted a sliver of his thought into it. Shortly afterwards, the surroundings of the jade pendant began to ripple. The sliver of thought the 9th elder had inserted was already sent away by a mysterious method. In the headquarters of the Radiant Saint Union, an old man sat on a cushion in the highest tower. A layer of Radiant Saint force completely enveloped his body. Suddenly, the Radiant Saint force around the old man rippled, before disappearing in the next moment. The old man suddenly snapped open his eyes and mumbled to himself, "Emergency message." What's happened for them to actually use the emergency message? An exquisite jade pendant had already appeared in the old man's hand at a certain moment. Shortly afterwards, a weak thought shot out from the pendant, entering the center of the old man's eyebrows. Suddenly, the old man was greatly terrified. What? A 24-year-old Class 6 Radiant Saint force. With talent for radiant arts approaching Class 7. The old man immediately stood up from the cushion. A dense ball of Radiant Saint force immediately gathered around the bottom of the old man's feet, like a cloud, and with a flash of white light, the old man disappeared. Chapter 732, Taking a Master Without Much Choice. Where the second test was held in the Radiant Saint Master Union, an old man quickly approached the entrance, so fast that he seemed to be stepping on clouds. He was a ruddy old man with eyes that seemed as profound as the vast night sky. It gave people a feeling that if they were not paying attention, they would fall into it and become lost. The old man wore long, white, luxurious robes, but he did not carry any sort of badge on his chest. As a result, it was impossible to tell just what class the old man was. As soon as the old man arrived at the second testing room, he was immediately attracted towards the dazzling light inside. Through the blinding light, he could vaguely see a slim person bathing within it. The person seemed like a descending god, filled with a certain holiness. The 9th and 14th elder not too far away were both already completely stupefied. They stared tongue-tied at Jian Chen within the white light and did not discover the old man at the entrance at all. Jian Chen's eyes were tightly closed. His two arms were spread out while his head was raised up high, holding a posture of gazing at the sky. He was currently using all he had to pull the Radiant Saint force from the barrier. At this moment, he was already functioning at his limit as a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, without holding back anything. This was because he knew that if he wanted to reach Class 7, this was perhaps the more crucial step, as only with a brilliant achievement could he be highly regarded in the Union. This would allow him to have an easier path towards Class 7. He knew many things. There were indeed very few Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters throughout the continent because most of them had gathered within the City of God. As a result, there were plenty of Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters in the city, with a few being supported by powerful organizations from behind. As for Jian Chen, although he had reached Class 6 at such a young age and would become the center of attention, he did not have anyone supporting him from behind. It was unable to prevent Radiant Saint Masters with powerful backgrounds from using underhand methods to force him out of a chance to reach Class 7. Jian Chen was even worried about the notion that there were a few people in the Union who would want to eliminate him for a greater chance at reaching Class 7 for themselves. Although Jian Chen had considered doing things with a low profile and without raising too much attention, it was just impossible. After all, only Class 6 Radiant Saint Master could obtain the chance at becoming Class 7, so he could not keep his strength as a Radiant Saint Master concealed. After all, a 24-year-old Class 6 Radiant Saint Master was something miraculous. However, Jian Chen believed that it was not enough with just this. He was also curious about the Radiant Arts, which was why he tried so hard on the second test. After all, the second test was to test talent for practicing Radiant Arts. Towards the ceiling of the room, around 45% of the Radiant Saint force sealed within had been drawn out from the barrier by Jian Chen, where it gathered around Jian Chen, radiating with blinding light. This was Jian Chen's limit. Right now, no matter how hard Jian Chen tried, he was unable to draw any more Radiant Saint force from the barrier. Looks like this is my limit. I just wonder about the results. Jian Chen sighed secretly to himself before slowly releasing the Radiant Saint force that he had forcefully drawn from the barrier. The Radiant Saint force around Jian Chen did not disperse, and was instead all sucked back into the barrier by a force, returning to how it was before. Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes. A sliver of exhaustion appeared on his face. Although Jian Chen did not even spend an hour on the test, the period of time had exhausted a large portion of Jian Chen's mental strength. He had not felt this tired ever since he reached Class 6. Jian Chen turned around wearily. He discovered the stunned 9th and 14th elder with a single glance, and with a change in his mood, a sliver of joy appeared in the depths of his eyes. He clasped his hands. "Elders, I've already completed the test. I wonder how I've gone." If it was before, Jian Chen would have still felt rather anxious, but after seeing the expressions of the two elders, he became confident. "Okay. Good. Good. Great. Excellent. This result is excellent. For a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master to be able to draw 45% of the Radiant Saint force from the barrier, it means that they are already approaching Class 7. My horizons really have been broadened today." As soon as Jian Chen finished speaking, an old voice sounded from near the door. The old man near the entrance strided in, his gaze at Jian Chen filled with praise and admiration. The old man alerted the 9th and 14th elders, allowing them to return to their senses. When they realized who it was, their expressions both changed and immediately clasped their hands at the old man. I greet the president. Closely afterwards, the ninth elder quickly turned around and scolded at Jian Chen with a low voice, Yang Yutian, this is the president of our union. Why don't you hurry up and greet him? Jian Chen was slightly surprised. However, he did not hesitate and immediately clasped his hands at the old man. Yang Yutian greets the president. The president of the union stared at Jian Chen with a smile and asked affectionately, Child, so you're called Yang Yutian. Tell me, how old are you? President, Yang Yutian is 24 this year. Jian Chen immediately replied. He knew very well that in the Radiant Saint Master Union, the president's power superseded everything. As for the elders, they stood under the president, holding varying statuses similar to patriarchs of different clans. A 24-year-old Radiant Saint Master, along with the talent in practicing radiant arts approaching Class 7. Good. The president was overjoyed. He also felt extremely excited from discovering such a great prodigy today. Shortly afterwards, the president seemed to remember something. A gleam of light immediately flashed across his eyes. Yang Yutian, are you willing to take me as your master, as well as join the Radiant Saint Master Union and become one of the core members? A sliver of shock flashed across Jian Chen's eyes. The president of the union actually wanted to take him as a disciple. It had greatly exceeded what he was expecting. The sliver of shock in Jian Chen's eyes was caught by the president. He could not help but smile, as he thought Jian Chen was shocked from the sudden but great news. He smiled, Yang Yutian, perhaps you're unwilling to take me as your master? Although that was what he said, there was no underlying tone of dissatisfaction at all. Jian Chen gritted his teeth and thought to himself, whatever, if I can increase the success rate of reaching Class 7 and saving mother and father, so what if it's just temporarily bowing down before someone? Compared to mother and father's lives, how significant is this mere pride? Thinking up to there, Jian Chen bowed low to the president. He said, I'm willing. Disciple Yang Yutian greets master. Congratulations president for gaining a disciple with such outstanding talent. What a joyous occasion. The 9th and 14th elders congratulated the president at the same time. The president smiled from the bottom of his heart, before pulling of an exquisitely crafted blue badge from his space ring, passing it to Jian Chen. Yang Yutian, you are the third disciple I've taken. The first one passed away 100 years ago from old age, while the second one is also Class 6 and is currently in seclusion, practicing radiant arts and making preparations for Class 7 in a year's time. This blue badge is the symbol of a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. You should wear it. Yes, Master. Jian Chen carefully accepted the blue badge from the president, placing it towards the left on his chest. 9th Elder, 14th Elder, the two of you should explain the rules and the other services offered by the union to my third disciple for me. The president turned around and told the two elders. We will follow what the president says. The president clearly held a very high status in the hearts of the two elders, as they both displayed courteous emotions. Child, you should first go with the two elders. Come back here in 3 days, we'll hold the ceremony of becoming a core member of the union. After the ceremony is over, you can enter the Radiant Saint Tower to learn radiant arts. The president turned around again and told Jian Chen. However, when he mentioned the ceremony of becoming a core member, a weird light flashed across the depths of his eyes. Hearing the radiant arts being mentioned again, Jian Chen's curiosity to it increased greatly again. He could not help but asked, Master, just what is these radiant arts? The president chuckled, radiant arts are the only method that Radiant Saint Masters can use to attack. There's a great variety of them, essentially infinite. Child, once you become a core member and enter the Radiant Saint Tower, you will understand more clearly yourself. Oh right, there's something else I have to remind you about. In this period of time, it's best if you don't come in contact with the people from the Kazda clan, the Kara clan and the Tsar family. Currently, the Holy Empire seems peaceful, but there's actually a raging storm underground. The peaceful Holy Empire is about to change, though. It has nothing to do with the Union at all as to which clan the Holy Empire falls to. You're not a member of the 3 clans, so it's best if you don't participate in it. Disciple understands. Jian Chen replied purposely with a respectful tone. Witnessing Jian Chen's conduct, the president nodded his head in satisfaction. Shortly afterwards, a white cloud quickly gathered under his feet, completely formed from radiant saint force. Under Jian Chen's astonished gaze, he departed on the cloud. Yang Yutian, do you see? When the president left, he used a radiant arte. He can fly with it, and its speed is also extremely great. If it is practiced to a high level, it's not any slower than saint rulers using spatial force. The 9th elder stared at Jian Chen with a smile. The talent Jian Chen had displayed along with the fact that he had become a disciple of the president had already caused the 2 Class 7 elders to treat him completely differently. If it was another Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, the 2 of them would not even bother to pay any attention as elders. Radiant arts, the only was Radiant Saint Masters can attack. I'm looking more and more forwards to it. I wonder just how powerful Radiant Saint Masters who are known to be harmless can become after practicing Radiant arts. Jian Chen thought to himself, Yang Yutian, let's go and sit there for a while. We can explain the rules as well as some other services offered to core members from the Union. The 14th elder said kindly. However, with his slightly husky voice, not only did he fail to sound gentle, he sounded rather creepy. Chapter 733, Radiant Arts, 1. Leaving from where the 9th and 14th elder stayed, Jian Chen walked straight towards the exit of the Radiant Saint Master Union. There were a lot of people at the headquarters of the Union. Not only were there many white-robed Radiant Saint Masters with badges of varying color, there were also a few people dressed as fighters. Although the fighters were not Radiant Saint Masters, they were members of the Union nonetheless. Without a doubt, the blue badge on Jian Chen's chest became the center of attention. All those who walked past Jian Chen could not help but look at Jian Chen with gazes of astonishment and shock. However, even more people looked at the exquisitely crafted blue badge on Jian Chen's chest, displaying envy that they struggled to conceal. Who is this person wearing a blue badge? The blue badge is the symbol of a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Perhaps this youth in his 20s is a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master? This youth only seems to be around 20, yet he has the right to wear the blue badge. Unbelievable. I'd say that the badge is most likely fake. I'll go contact the 9th elder immediately. Humph, what nerves to actually wear a fake badge in the Radiant Saint Union. He'll get more than what he bargained for soon. What clan does this young master belong to actually reach Class 6 so young? I've stayed in the City of God for so long and I've got some understanding as to the number of high-class Radiant Saint Masters. Why don't I know that person? He probably just seems young, and is most likely an old monster who's lived for a few centuries. He just used some special method to rejuvenate his youth and stayed young. The hubbub of discussion echoed in the surroundings. Jian Chen's appearance had already attracted everyone's attention, because all Radiant Saint Masters with blue badges were important people. They did not appear very often within the Union, but every time they did, it would always raise the attention of a lot of people. Jian Chen paid no attention to the sounds of discussions in the surroundings. He had already gotten used to being stared at by countless people long ago. As he gazed about, he only saw that the majority of the Radiant Saint Masters were Class 2 to Class 4. There were very few people carrying the Azure badge of Class 5, and as for the blue Class 6 badge, there was no one else other than him. Jian Chen passed through the corridor and arrived at the ground floor of the Union. As soon as he began walking down the corridor, he spotted Lin Bai, Jamie and Gether, jogging over excitedly. Brother Yang Yutian, congratulations on becoming a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. As soon as Jamie arrived in front of Jian Chen, he said a words of congratulation. As for his eyes, they were stuck to the blue badge on Jian Chen's chest, unable to be moved away. They were filled with admiration. "Brother Yang Yutian, you've really hid it well from us along the way. Who would have thought that you're actually a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master?" Lin Bai said bitterly, while his eyes were also glued to the blue badge. Jian Chen's attitude was easygoing and spoke to them amiably, without any arrogance. After a few casual words with the three of them, he bid farewell to them. He planned on going on a stroll through the streets to see if he could find any materials for the azulate swords. "Brother Yang Yutian, I, Lin Bai, am just one idle man. I just happen to have nothing to do. Why don't I take you around the city? I've lived in the City of God for several decades. I might not know the City of God like the back of my hand, but I do know quite a few famous places. Then I will be troubling Brother Lin Bai." Jian Chen clasped his hands at Lin Bai with a smile. "Brother Yang Yutian, as a vice manager, I can't leave the branch for too long, so I must hurry back. I won't be able to accompany you, please forgive me." Jamie bid farewell to Jian Chen, before leaving with a heart full of joy. This was because he had just received the news that the headquarters were extremely happy with what he did, and would promote him to the manager of a second-rate branch, which held much more power than the vice-manager of a third-rate branch. Jian Chen and Lin Bai bid farewell to the examiner Gether before going outside. At this moment, Lei Mingao, who had fallen out with Jian Chen, just happened to walk into the headquarters under the lead of his cousin Lei Yin. As soon as the two of them stepped into the building, they met Jian Chen. Almost involuntarily, Lei Mingao and his cousin Lei Yin looked towards Jian Chen's chest. When they discovered the dark blue badge, their expressions suddenly changed greatly as disbelief poured from their eyes. Blue badge, how is this possible?" Lei Mingao immediately began to pale. At that moment, he no longer believed his eyes. Seeing Jian Chen's blue badge, even the arrogant Lei Yin was greatly frightened. She mumbled rather gloomily, Impossible, how is this possible, Lei Mingao, Lei Yin, perhaps the two of you still want to take Brother Yang Yutian's tiger cub?" Lin Bai stared coldly at the two people. Although the clan they belonged to was not weak, Lin Bai was a Class 5 Radiant Saint Master and was a member who could potentially reach Class 6 in the future. He received the protection of the Union, so he naturally did not fear the mere Lei family. What Lin Bai had said caused Lei Mingao and Lei Yin's expressions to change again. A Class 6 Radiant Saint Master was already a core member of the Union. They definitely could not afford to offend one. Even their clan, the Lei family, did not dare to offend a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master so easily. Jian Chen glanced past the two people indifferently. He did not pay any attention to the two of them at all. With his identity as a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master as well as a Saint Ruler, he was uninterested in bickering with them. "Uncle Lin Bai, let's go and stop wasting their precious time." Jian Chen and Lin Bai directly walked past Lei Mingao and Lei Yin. Who would have thought that he's actually a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master? Such a young Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Unbelievable. Lei Yin mumbled to herself. Her expression was extremely complicated, and shortly afterwards, a gleam of light flashed across her eyes. "I must quickly tell third grandfather this." Thinking up to that, Lei Yin turned around and left. She did not pay any attention to Lei Mingao, who had yet to return to his senses. As Jian Chen and Lin Bai strolled through the streets, Jian Chen learnt a little about Lin Bai's background after a small conversation. Lin Bai was not a wealthy son of an aristocratic family. He did not have a great background at all. His hometown was a remote village in the mountains, where everyone there lived off farming and hunting. Lin Bai's parents were extremely simple and ordinary common folk. However, the son that they had did not have the same destiny. Not only was he the smartest child of the village, he accidentally discovered his abilities as a Radiant Saint Master in his youth. Afterwards, he became the most dazzling child prodigy of their area. Lin Bai's talent as a Radiant Saint Master was extremely great. He stayed in the village for around 2 decades. When he was 20, he had already reached Class 3. Afterwards, he was discovered by a Heaven Saint Master of the Union who was out for a mission. He was brought into the City of God by that Heaven Saint Master, and joined the Union while also taking a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master as a Master. Afterwards, Lin Bai's life underwent a great change, which allowed him to become an outstanding Class 5 Radiant Saint Master when he was only in his 40s. He even had made a name for himself in the Union, and received the high regards of some high-ranking members of the Union. In the City of God, there were even a few people from great clans who wanted to pull Lin Bai to their side, but they were declined. Jian Chen and Lin Bai passed through streets and alleyways, constantly entering and exiting different stores. Only until it was nightfall did they find an inn to settle down. At the same time, in the lantern-lit Lei family, the white-robed Lei Yin arrived before a tall tower. She stood respectfully behind the tightly shut door and said, "Third Grandpa, Lei Yin has news to report." The door began to open slowly. A ray of soft, white light shone through the crack, illuminating the darkness. "Lei Yin, come in." An old voice echoed from inside. "Yes, Third Grandpa." Lei Yin entered with gentle steps and her head down. Inside, there was an old man who sat cross-legged on a cushion. His eyes were closed while he held his fingers in a weird shape. A layer of thick Radiant Saint Force enveloped his entire body. The Radiant Saint Force was rather brisk, constantly surging about. Lei Yin stopped 3 meters away from the old man. "Grandfather," Lei Yin saw a young man who seemed around 20 outside the Union headquarters today. "He's already a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master." The Radiant Saint Force around the old man began to ripple violently. His eyes snapped open and said in surprise, "What? A Class 6 Radiant Saint Master in his 20s? Lei Yin, are you sure you did not see wrong?" At that time, Brother Lei Mingao was also there. If Grandpa doesn't believe it, Grandpa can ask Brother Lei Mingao, or ask the people in the Union. Lei Yin said with a respectful tone. "I've never even thought about a 20-year-old Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. This is just too astounding. I'll go contact my good friends in the Union immediately." A jade pendant immediately appeared in the hands of the old man and a sliver of thought shot into it from the center of his eyebrows. Chapter 734, Radiant Arts, 2. Very soon, a weak presence shot out from the jade pendant, which entered the center of the old man's eyebrows. The old man sat silently with his eyes closed for a little, before they snapped open. He said in surprise, "It's actually true. There really is a 24-year-old person called Yang Yutian who passed the test for Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. Isn't his talent a little too great? Unbelievable. Since he's reached Class 6, he definitely will participate in the fight for Class 7 in a year's time. Looks like." The old man's gaze flickered. Shortly afterwards, he waved his hand and said, "Lei Yin, you can leave." "Yes, Third Grandfather." Lei Yin departed courteously. As soon as Lei Yin left, the heavy door closed once again. The old man sat in the closed room pondering. Afterwards, he pulled out the jade pendant and sent another thought into the pendant again, disappearing into it. Within the City of God, a refined middle-aged man sat on a bed in a luxurious manner. In front of the man was a dagger, half a meter long, radiating with soft light as it floated him air. There were energy ripples from the dagger that indicated an extremely great power was hidden inside. The man completely focused his attention on the dagger, which was completely formed from Radiant Saint Force, and sighed softly, "There's still another year and a half till the next time the Saint artifact activates. Though, my Radiant Arte is still stuck at the 3rd level. My improvement in these 50 years is quite unsatisfying. I wonder if I still can place in the top 10 during the competition in half a year's time. Suddenly, the man's expression changed. With a flip of his hand, an ancient jade pendant appeared in his hand. A weak thought flew out from the pendant, and entered the center of the man's head. The man sat in silence with closed eyes, for a while, before slowly opening his eyes. A strange light appeared in his eyes and he sighed. There's actually someone who's reached class 6 when they're 24. Is this true? Inconceivable. Doesn't that mean his speed in improvement is several times greater than fighters? If that's true, then the Lei family's done something great. The middle-aged man dispersed the radiant saint force gathered before him. He stood up from his bed and paced about the luxurious room, pondering. Shortly afterwards, the man stopped. He looked towards the door and called out, "Mr. Feng." The door was opened soundlessly. A sturdy and bald man walked in and clasped his hands at the middle-aged man. "Esteemed Mr. Cheng, what are you in need of?" The middle-aged man said, "Mr. Feng, a prodigy appeared in the Union today, who reached class 6 despite being so young. That person's called Yang Yutian. Go track his movement immediately, and after you find him, tell him that I, Chang Duantian, wants to wholeheartedly become friends with him, and that in 2 days, I'll reserve the most famous ferry on Fragrance River, 10 kilometers away from the city. I hope to have a heart-to-heart conversation with him." "Yes, Mr. Cheng, I'll go do it immediately," the bald man said with a deep voice. "Mr. Feng, I don't know if Yang Yutian is still at the Union. If he's not there, you can use the entire clan to search for him." In the moment the bald man left the room, the indifferent voice of the middle-aged man sounded once again. At the same time, in various locations of the City of God, several important people received the same message. In that moment, almost all powerful clans in the City of God had learnt that a 24-year-old class 6 Radiant Saint Master had appeared in the Union. In another luxurious manner in the City of God, an old voice echoed from a small, tightly guarded courtyard. "A prodigy's appeared in the Union. He's reached class 6 despite only being 24. This is an extremely rare genius. Xia Ho, immediately take people to look for this person and invite him as a treasured guest to my Ho Manor. You must remember to never fall out with him." "Yes, sir." A cold voice echoed from outside. Shortly afterwards, the black shadow shook slightly, and shot off into the distance at great speeds. South of the City of God, a simple-looking middle-aged man sat in a dark basement, and practiced his radiant arts. The thick, milky white light illuminated the dark basement, and bleached everything. At the same time, the entire room was blazing hot, as if it was a sea of fire. The heat completely originated from the radiant arte. If there was a class 6 master present, he would definitely be extremely shocked, because it was only a phenomenon that would appear when the radiant arte had been practiced to an extremely great level. Even within all the class 6 radiant saint masters of the City of God, the amount of people who had reached such a level in a radiant arte could be counted on fingers, no more than 10. Suddenly, the expression of the middle-aged man in the basement changed. The radiant saint force radiating with great heat immediately disappeared. Shortly afterwards, the man pulled out a jade pendant and a sliver of thought shot out from it, into the center of his eyebrows. The middle-aged man sat close-eyed in silence. He said with a deep voice to himself, "A 24-year-old class 6 Radiant Saint Master with talent approaching class 7 for Radiant Arts, as well as the third disciple of the Union President. Yang Yutian, you make me feel a sliver of threat." A flash of slight coldness flashed across the man's eyes. He then opened the door of the basement. A ball of thick radiant saint force gathered quickly around his feet like a cloud, and the middle-aged man just left, as if he was flying on a cloud. After leaving the basement, the man gazed into the night at the dark, starry sky. He said casually, "Shadow, a genius has recently appeared in the Union. He's called Yang Yutian, a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Immediately find his whereabouts and invite him to the manor. I want to talk with him. Yes, first young master. A husky voice sounded from a dark corner behind the middle-aged man. Afterwards, there was a soft breeze, before everything returned to calm again. The night was late and at this moment, Jian Chen was currently resting in a luxurious inn. He had no clue that his performance that day had raised the attention of several powerful clans in the City of God. Sigh, after rushing about for a day, I haven't even found a single material that is used to craft the azulate swords. If this continues, I wonder just when will I collect all the materials. Jian Chen mumbled to himself as he half laid on the bed, and felt a little down. Radiant arts, the only method in which Radiant Saint Masters can attack. I wonder how powerful it is. I really do look forwards to the moment I enter the Radiant Saint Tower in 3 days. He then thought about the Radiant Arts and immediately became impatient. He was tempted to go to the Radiant Saint Tower right now to see the only way Radiant Saint Masters could attack, Radiant Arts. Suddenly, a gleam of light flashed across Jian Chen's eyes. He immediately sat up on his bed and stared in the direction of the door. The tightly closed door was opened silently. A person shrouded in black mist walked in from outside. His appearance could not be seen, while only the outline of body was visible. He seemed like a ghost. Jian Chen stared calmly at the person in the black mist and asked with a deep voice, "Who are you? Are you Yang Yutian?" The person replied with a question with his husky voice. "Correct, that is me." Jian Chen did not have any fear. Although the person before him seemed strange, he was only a fighter with darkness-attributed saint force and he was only a heaven saint master. "Yang Yutian, the first young master has invited you to go speak with him. Come with me." The silhouette's husky voice was filled with coldness. "Who's the first young master?" Jian Chen asked calmly. "You'll know when you get there," said the shadow. A sneer appeared on Jian Chen's lips. He leaned comfortably on his pillow and did not pay any attention to the black shadow. "My apologies, I'm currently resting. I don't have the time to see your young master. Sir, please leave my room." "Yang Yutian, you don't know what's good for yourself." The person's voice slowly grew cold, and with it, there was a thick killing intent. Roar. Perhaps it was because of the killing intent, the white tiger on the pillow immediately stood up. It stared angrily at the shadow and in its intelligent eyes, there was an extremely personified sliver of defiance. Although the tiger was still a Class 5 magical beast, akin to human Earth Saint Masters, it did not show any fear towards the Heaven Saint Master shadow. It even provoked it purposely, clearly looking down on the Heaven Saint Master. "Shadow, don't forget where you are. Perhaps you want to move against the esteemed Class 6 Radiant Saint Master?" Suddenly, a powerful voice echoed from outside. A sturdy, bold man walked in from outside, his feet floating about the ground. "Humph, Feng Jianming, you've really come at the wrong time." The shadow sneered. He clearly recognized the big bald man. The bald Feng Jianming glanced at the shadow with a sneer and said with a mocking tone, "All you know is acting about and scaring people. You scare those people who don't know you use darkness-attributed radiant saint force. To me, you're no different from an idiot. What did you say?" The black mist began to tremble violently. The husky voice was filled with anger. "Shadow, if you're unhappy, we can fight it out and see who's stronger. Though, I've got things I gotta do. I don't have the time to bicker with you. I'll fight you any time after I complete the mission Mr. Cheng's told me to do." The big bald man said coldly. "Humph." The shadow snorted and stopped speaking. Feng Jianming then looked at Jian Chen. The coldness on his face disappeared, changing to a different expression. He bowed courteously to Jian Chen, "Esteemed Sir Yang Yutian, I am Feng Jianming. I've come to deliver a message from Mr. Cheng." Mr. Cheng would wholeheartedly like to become friends with you, and has also reserved the most famous ferry on Fragrance in 2 days, 10 kilometers from the city. He wishes that he can use that time as an opportunity to have a hearty conversation with you. Mr. Cheng? Jian Chen's interest was piqued. He looked towards the bald man and asked, "Are you from the Cheng family, one of the 8 great clans who only stand below the Tsar family?" Chapter 735, Radiant Arts, 3, from the 9th and 14th Elder, Jian Chen gained a better understanding of the distribution of power in the City of God. Within the City of God, the most powerful clan was the Tsar family. The City of God, one of the 7 capitals of the continent, was completely controlled by the Tsar family. Without any exaggerating, the Tsar family are the rulers of the City of God, as well as one of the 3 clans that controlled the empire. Beneath the Tsar family, there were 8 great clans. The 8 clans were all extremely strong, possessing strength no lower than hermit clans, while some of them even possessed strength that superseded several hermit clans. The Cheng family was one of the 8 clans. As for the Lei family that had disagreements with Jian Chen when he was on the road, they were only a rather well-known clan in the city. A secondary force. There were plenty of clans like this, though a great portion of them were subsidiaries to the 8 clans. Seeing the shock on Jian Chen's face, Feng Jianming was secretly delighted. He said with a smile, "Sir Yang Yutian has guessed correctly. Mr. Cheng indeed belongs to the Cheng family of the 8 clans, and in the clan, Mr. Cheng hold a very high position. I must apologize, I will be going to the Radiant Saint Tower to practice Radiant Arts soon. I won't have the time for quite some time, so please transfer my message to him, that I appreciate his kind intentions, but I perhaps won't be able to attend the ferry on Fragrance River in 2 days' time." Jian Chen clasped his hands at Feng Jianming and said calmly. Feng Jianming was slightly surprised. He had never thought that after declaring that he was from the Cheng family, one of the 8 clans, Yang Yutian would reject him so flatly. It had caused him some surprise. Although the invitation was rejected, Feng Jianming did not become unhappy even in the slightest. He clasped his hands at Jian Chen, "Since Sir Yang Yutian needs to go to the Radiant Saint Tower to practice Radiant Arts, Feng Jianming will not interrupt Sir anymore. Sir, Feng Jianming's mission is now accomplished and will now report back to Mr. Cheng. Farewell." After he finished what he was saying, he turned around to the shadow behind him. His expression immediately became cold. "Shadow, I hope you won't forget the rule set down by the Union. If you break it, you won't be able to escape punishment even with your clan supporting you. You probably will even die." "Humph, Feng Jianming, that's none of your business." The husky voice sounded from within the black mist, filled with cold intent. The corner of Feng Jianming's lips curled into a sneer. "The esteemed Sir Yang Yutian is Mr. Cheng's guest, as well as an esteemed guest of the Cheng family. If anything happens to Sir Yang Yutian, you should know the outcome, Shadow." With that, Feng Jianming turned around and left. Feng Jian Ming. From within the black mist, there was the sound of grinding teeth. The person shrouded in dark mist clearly dreaded the big bald man. Jian Chen glanced at the angry black mist and said indifferently, "Sir, please leave my room, I need to rest." Within Jian Chen's indifferent gaze, an undetectable killing intent flickered about. If it were not for that fact that he needed to hide his identity as a fighter in the City of God, how would he let a mere Heaven Saint Master act so brashly before him? "Humph." The person shrouded in black mist snorted coldly, before leaving unwillingly. Originally, he carried the notion that if Jian Chen did not want to go with him, he would just forcefully take him away. However, after arguing with Feng Jianming, he did not dare to do that anymore. On that night, Jian Chen was destined to fail to rest peacefully. After the bald Feng Jianming's shadow left, there were plenty more people who went to the inn to look for the resting Jian Chen. Their intentions were all the same, without any exceptions, to represent their masters in wish of inviting Jian Chen to their clans as a guest. However, Jian Chen wriggled out of all of them, declining every single one. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. In those 3 days, Jian Chen had basically gone to every famous store in the city under Lin Bai's lead, but the outcome was disappointing. He failed to find even a single material to craft the azulate swords. In that period of time, people from the 8 clans constantly went to find Jian Chen, to take the initiative and get on Jian Chen's good side. They also spared no trouble to invite Jian Chen to their clans as a guest. However, a few arrogant people from the 8 clans looked down on Jian Chen, speaking to him intransigently. However, not only did they fail to get what they wanted, they were met with a cold shoulder. Although Jian Chen was an outsider, a person with no right or power in the City of God, as long as he used his identity as a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, he did not even need to fear the 8 famous clans. Other than the 8 great clans, there were even a few second-rate clans who went and displayed goodwill to Jian Chen. The second-rate clans were not as intransigent, treating Jian Chen respectfully and extremely courteously. 3 days later was also the day when Jian Chen would go to the Union to participate in the ceremony of becoming a core member, before going into the Radiant Saint Tower to learn radiant arts. On that day, he bid farewell to Lin Bai rather early, before calling a luxurious carriage towards the Union. Jian Chen sat in the jolting carriage as he fed several thousand-year heavenly resources to the white tiger. Right now, he could feel that the tiger had already reached the peak of Class 5, akin to a human 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. With the increase of strength, the speed at which the tiger absorbed heavenly resources also increased. Right now, it could consume a dozen or so thousand-year heavenly resources in one go, no longer needing to sleep to absorb the medicinal effects. Xiao Bai, looks like it's not long before you break through Class 5 and become a Class 6 magical beast. Jian Chen mumbled to the small white tiger with a soft gaze. MRRR, the tiger who was wolfing down the heavenly resources seemed to be able to understand what Jian Chen was saying. It gave out a few slurry cries, while a complacent light appeared in its eyes. Seeing that, Jian Chen smiled. The tiger was a winged tiger god and the intelligence it possessed was extremely rare in magical beasts, as it possessed self-consciousness. At this moment, it possessed the intelligence similar to an 11-year-old child despite being only Class 5. The carriage shot down the wide streets, and arrived very quickly at the main entrance of the Union. When Jian Chen left the carriage, a female in long white robes immediately arrived before him. Quickly glancing at the blue badge of Jian Chen's chest, she immediately bowed deeply to Jian Chen, esteemed Radiant Saint Master, are you perhaps Master Yang Yutian? Jian Chen examined the female. She was around 20 years of age with fine features and was rather pretty. On the right side of her protruding chest, there was an orange badge, indicating the identity of a Class 2 Radiant Saint Master. I am Yang Yutian. What is it? Jian Chen asked indifferently. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am the 5th Elder's attendant. I've come under the orders of the 5th Elder to await for Master Yang Yutian's arrival. Sir, please follow me. I will take you to go see the 5th Elder. Jian Chen followed the female into the Union. This time, Jian Chen was directly brought to the 3rd story of the castle, before being led into a beautifully decorated room. The room was very large and was full of extravagant decor. In the center of the room was a cushion, where a ruddy old man sat. The old man sat with his eyes closed, in a way where he seemed like an old monk. On the old man's chest was a shiny purple badge, indicating that he was a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. Esteemed 5th Elder, Master Yang Yutian has arrived. The female bowed respectfully to the old man. You can leave. The old man said. Yes, 5th Elder. The female left with gently steps, before closing the door behind her. Yang Yutian greets the 5th Elder. Jian Chen clasped his hands at the old man. Although his tone was courteous, he carried no respectful expression. The fifth elder slowly opened his eyes. The moment they opened, the rays of light in the room seemed to grow bright. In the next moment, the fifth elder's bright eyes seemed to become the only thing in the room, as if there was a whole, separate world in his eyes. In the moment he saw the elder's eyes, Jian Chen's eyes became slightly lost. The fifth elder's gaze contained the world, but was also as profound as the vast night sky. It actually caused Jian Chen to become involuntarily lost within it. However, Jian Chen returned to his senses very soon. A sliver of shock flashed past his eyes, and his gaze towards the fifth elder also underwent a great change. Although Jian Chen did not become completely taken within it just before, he was shocked speechless by the fifth elder's ability. With just a gaze, he had been imperceptibly affected. This caused a great storm to brew over Jian Chen's calmness. It must be known that not only was he a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, he was also an extremely powerful Saint Ruler who had comprehended the mysteries of the world with a naturally powerful presence. If it was another Class 6 Radiant Saint Master or another Saint Ruler, they definitely would not have been able to break out from the trance as easily. Seeing how quickly Jian Chen had recovered, an undetectable sliver of surprise flashed across the fifth elder's eyes. His opinion of Jian Chen increased once again. Yang Yutian, you really are an unprecedented prodigy of the Tian Yuan continent. You indeed possess power that exceeds Radiant Saint Masters at the same level as you. Thank you for praising me. Jian Chen remained calm, without any ripples of emotions in his tone. Not bad, not arrogant or rash. You're quite a bit stronger than the other Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. The fifth elder nodded his head slightly, very satisfied with Jian Chen's performance in his heart. He continued, Yang Yutian, you must know the purpose of you coming here today. After today, you'll become a core member of the Union and will be able to enter the Radiant Saint Tower to practice radiant arts which have been passed down from the ancient times. Only our Radiant Saint Master Union possesses these radiant arts. They're definitely not something that regular Radiant Saint Masters can obtain. Hearing that, Jian Chen's heart was immediately filled with anticipation. He had wanted to see the wondrous radiant arts since long ago. At this moment, the fifth elder slowly raised his hand. The surrounding Radiant Saint force quickly gathered in his palm, forming a huge, silvery sword 3 meters in length in the blink of an eye. He said, Yang Yutian, do you see? This is a radiant arte. It's condensed from the surrounding radiant satin force using a special method, forming something with great power for attack. Jian Chen immediately looked at the huge sword. Although the sword was condensed from the gentle radiant saint force, he could feel the ripples of an extremely forceful energy, filled with violence. Just when Jian Chen looked at the sword, a weird expression flashed across the fifth elder's eyes. An undetectable ripple of thought shot out from the center of his eyebrows, landing in between Jian Chen's eyebrows with lightning speed. Chapter 736, Comprehending the Arts. 1. An invisible strand of thought entered the center of Jian Chen's eyebrows. It caused Jian Chen to become stagnant and the light in his eyes quickly disappeared. It became dull, as if he was an empty, spiritless shell. The fifth elder glared at Jian Chen. Only after discovering Jian Chen's dull and lifeless eyes did he relax immediately. He could not help but sneer coldly as he mumbled to himself, Yang Yutian, no matter how prodigious of a genius you are, you're still helpless before my soul confusion. The fifth elder understood that the technique would not last very long on Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, so his face immediately became stern. With a thought, a thick layer of Radiant Saint force quickly gathered before him, slowly forming a weird seal, floating mid-air. The fifth elder's gaze immediately became sharp. An invisible thought of his drifted from the center of his eyebrows, closely joining with the weird seal before him, as if it was drawing something. The whole process lasted for quite a while, before the fifth elder finally retracted his energy. He looked up at Jian Chen and said, Yang Yutian, this is the symbol of the core members of the Union. I'll fuse it into your mind, don't resist. As soon as he finished, the fifth elder extended his finger and pointed at the weird seal floating before him. It immediately turned into a white streak, disappearing into the center of Jian Chen's eyebrows. Afterwards, there was deathly silence. Only after the seal successfully entered Jian Chen's head did the elder relax greatly. He could not help but have the corners of his lips curl into a slight but weird smile. He thought, Yang Yutian, you won't be able to escape from the Union's control no matter what with this now, unless you reach Class 8. But that's impossible. The fifth elder knew very well about the effects of the seal. Once the seal entered the target's mind, it would hide deeply. Even Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters were unable to detect the existence of the seal. Although the seal controlled the target's life, its greatest ability was that it would unconsciously influence the target's thoughts, making them become loyal to the Union. The Union would take up all of the target's thoughts. Once a lot of time had passed, the seal will have completely fused with the target spirit, and the person would also become completely subservient to the Union. The person who cast it would even be able to directly control the person. The fifth elder gradually calmed down and sent out another sliver of thought, entering Jian Chen's head by the center of his eyebrows. Shortly afterwards, Jian Chen's body jerked slightly and his dull eyes recovered some life. His gaze was calm, completely the same as before, as if nothing had happened at all. Yang Yutian, this is your communication jade. This communication jade can only be used by Radiant Saint Masters. Not only is it something that symbolizes your status as a core member of the Union, you're also able to communicate with other core members in a given area through this. An ancient jade pendant had already appeared in the elder's hands at some certain time. He passed it over to Jian Chen with a smile which was filled with benevolence. Jian Chen accepted the jade pendant from the fifth elder as he would normally. He saw that the jade pendant was around half the size of a hand and carried marks left behind by the past. On both sides of the pendant, there were intricate carvings. Yang Yutian, you must remember that the communication jade can only be used by you and mustn't be given to anyone else. It's extremely valuable and originates from the ancient times. There aren't many left now. Other than the core members of the Union, only a few important members of the Union possess the right to carry it. The fifth elder's calm voice carried some severity. Yang Yutian understands. After a slight clasping of his hands, he put the communication jade into his space ring. The fifth elder nodded happily. Yang Yutian, you're now a core member of the Union. This communication jade will now be the symbol of your status, and with it, you can now enter the Radiant Saint Tower to practice radiant arts. By the way, the method of using it is recorded within the pendant. All you need is to send your thoughts into it and you'll know. Alright, I need to go rest for a while, you should go. The Radiant Saint Tower is at the very top of the castle. You shouldn't have any problems getting there with the pendant. Jian Chen left the fifth elder's room. As soon as he left, his gaze immediately became icy cold and a surge of powerful killing intent flashed across his eyes. However, he recovered back to normal in an instant, as if nothing had happened. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, is there anywhere I can help you with? A soft voice sounded from behind Jian Chen. It was the girl who had brought Jian Chen to the room, currently looking at him with a courteous gaze. I'm unfamiliar with this area. Take me to the Radiant Saint Tower. Jian Chen said indifferently. Yes, Master Yang Yutian. However, I do not possess the right to enter the Radiant Saint Tower. I can only take you to the main entrance. The servant girl said. No problem, lead the way. After Jian Chen had left, a figure in a light screen appeared in the fifth elder's room. If Jian Chen was there, he would recognize that the person was the master he had accepted, the president of the Radiant Saint Union. Fifth elder, was everything successful? The president of the union stared at the fifth elder. His profound gaze seemed to be able to see through the elder's spirit. The elder was also a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master, yet he carried an expression of great respect. President, this Yang Yutian really does have some abilities. He actually broke free from my bewitching eye, making me use soul confusion. Though, it was still very successful, just that using soul confusion made me consume quite some energy. Listening to the fifth elder's report, the president was extremely satisfied. He said, this Yang Yutian's talent is extremely great, especially in the area of radiant arts. It's already approaching Class 7. If he reaches Class 7, perhaps his level for radiant arts will reach my level. So we all should treat him with care. The president is extremely correct. We definitely cannot let such a prodigy go. The fifth elder said. Also, I have a weird feeling. This Yang Yutian might become the first Class 8 Radiant Saint Master since the ancient times in the future. The president muttered to himself with a stern expression. What? The fifth elder was greatly surprised and stared at the president in disbelief. The president did not understand why the fifth elder was so surprised. He continued, Fifth elder, the news about Yang Yutian must have already spread to the three great clans of the empire. Right now, the Holy Empire is not very peaceful, so Yang Yutian's safety is extremely crucial. You will handle this. Yes, President. After handing over the tasks, the president's image completely disappeared along with the light screen, as if he had never appeared before. Jian Chen followed behind the servant expressionlessly, up through the castle. The gleam in his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. The Radiant Saint Tower was at the very top of the castle. It was a structure that symbolized the union. The very tip of the tower was where the only saint artifact that allowed Radiant Saint Masters to reach Class 7 was kept, hidden within a 10-meter wide ball of pure Radiant Saint force, which Jian Chen saw when he first arrived at the Union. The servant arrived at the main entrance of the Radiant Saint Tower with Jian Chen and stopped, Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, this is the furthest I can take you. Jian Chen nodded slightly. He scanned past the big, tightly shut door in front of him, before striding in. Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, please provide an object of authentication. As soon as Jian Chen approached the door, he was stopped by a guard outside the door. The guard was a middle-aged man, a Heaven Saint Master. Jian Chen said nothing, directly pulling out the communication jade from his space ring that was from the fifth elder. The guard took up the jade pendant from Jian Chen's hand and examined it. He returned it to Jian Chen after confirming its authenticity, before making a gesture towards the door, Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, please. With that, the door towards the tower began to open. Jian Chen passed through the door and walked up narrow, coiling stairs up the tower. He was currently at the top of the castle. After climbing up a height of 20 meters, Jian Chen finally arrived before a small door. Shortly afterwards, he focused his attention and discovered an old, green-robed old man, sitting on the ground. He was guarding the small door. Saint Ruler. Jian Chen was secretly surprised. He had never thought that there would be a Saint Ruler guarding the place. Do you possess the object of authentication? The old man remained close-eyed and said calmly. Jian Chen immediately pulled out the communication jade. You may enter. Remember, do not bring anything out from inside. Do not play any tricks. This is a barrier cast down by Saint Kings, and all objects within have a special mark. Once they are brought out, you will be killed mercilessly by the barrier. The old man remained close-eyed, yet his tone was stern and cold. Thank you, Senior, for your warning. Jian Chen clasped his hands at the old man, before striding in. He pushed open the small wooden door and entered. What he saw inside was a large hall. The decor of the hall was extremely simple, other than the single bookshelf in the center of the room. There were a few tables and chairs placed neatly around the room. Jian Chen gazed around, before focusing on the shelf of books in the center, slowly walking over. There were not many books on the shelf. It did not even exceed 100, all with varying thicknesses. Each book was made from high-class magical beast skin. The skins were already yellowed, carrying marks left behind by the past. They had already existed for an unknown amount of time. Perhaps these are the secret manuals in which the radiant arts are recorded in? Looking around at the books, Jian Chen mumbled to himself. Afterwards, he randomly pulled out a book, bearing the 3 large words Radiant Saint Shield on the cover in elegant handwriting. Filled with curiosity, Jian Chen began to read slowly. Gradually, he gained some understanding of the radiant arte. The Radiant Saint Shield was a defensive-type Radiant Arte and seemed to be made just for Radiant Saint Masters. Other than Radiant Saint Masters, no one else could practice it, not even fighters. The technique was essentially coalescing the surrounding Radiant Saint force into a shield to block the opponent's attack, and its strength would vary according to the caster's strength. It sounded easy, but actually using Radiant Saint force to create a shield capable of blocking powerful attacks was not that easy. In other words, without any exaggeration whatsoever, even a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master would never be able to coalesce a shield from Radiant Saint force capable of blocking powerful attacks without grasping the basics. This was because Radiant Saint force was different from the Saint force of other attributes. Radiant Saint force was innately filled with a gentle characteristic, possessing the wondrous and powerful ability of rejuvenation. As a result, it created fragile Radiant Saint Masters, which made Radiant Saint Masters to become known publicly as a harmless group, unable to attack, on the Tianyuan continent. However, the secret technique for Radiant Arts was a unique way of converting the gentle Radiant Saint force, transforming it into extreme Yang Qi, allowing it to be able to harm people. However, the process of conversion was extremely complicated. Jian Chen believed that if there were no relevant resources, even Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters would not be able to come up with such a method. Chapter 737, Comprehending the Arts, 2. Jian Chen carefully read the information in the book. Afterwards, he closed his eyes and pondered for a while. He silently simulated the coalescence of the Radiant Saint Shield in his mind, before snapping open his eyes. His gaze immediately became determined. Radiant Saint Shield, Jian Chen said, word by word. He slowly raised his right hand, and thick Radiant Saint force quickly gathered in his hand. In just a single second, it gathered to form a meter-wide shield. The entire shield was ethereal, as if it was a cloud of mist. The hand Jian Chen had extended towards it actually passed through it without any obstructions. Jian Chen revealed an expression of disappointment. The Radiant Saint Shield was the ultimate shield to block attacks in terms of defense. Although the shield he had formed possessed a shape, it had no other use. It was completely and utterly useless, unable to even block a breeze, much less powerful attacks. Looks like grasping Radiant Arts is not easy. To convert the gentle Radiant Saint force to extreme Yang Qi is just too difficult. The true Radiant Saint Shield recorded in the book is something tangible and is much stronger than Essence Iron, yet the Radiant Saint Shield I've formed in only ethereal, nothing like the actual thing. Jian Chen murmured to himself. The gentleness and regenerative abilities of Radiant Saint Force innately restricted its potential for growth. As a result, Radiant Saint Masters were publicly renowned as harmless people. Their weakness and inability to cultivate Saint Force made them the same as ordinary folk. He had failed the first time, but Jian Chen did not become dejected at all. He read the description of converting Radiant Saint Force in the book carefully again. He understood that in order to practice Radiant Arts, the conversion of Radiant Saint Force was an extremely crucial step. Jian Chen completely forgot about time in the Radiant Saint Tower. He devoted all his attention into the practice, while the small tiger that accompanied him did not interrupt Jian Chen either. It lay quietly on Jian Chen's shoulder, constantly moving its little head, observing the surroundings curiously. Half a day later, Jianchen slowly put away the book in his hand. He raised his right hand again, and the surrounding radiant saint force quickly coalesced, creating a meter-wide round shield once again. Jianchen stared at the shield in his hand in interest, but then his gaze became gloomy. He sighed gently, "This still isn't enough. The shield's still too ethereal. Looks like I still haven't completely grasped the method of conversion." Jianchen allowed the shield to disperse, but he did not continue looking at the book. He pondered for a while with his head down. In that half a day, he had already memorized all the information in the book. He could probably even recite it backwards, so there was no point in any more reading. Right now, he needed to master the conversion of Radiant Saint Force, because only then could he continue on to Radiant Arts. "Youngster, you must be new." Suddenly, an old voice echoed from behind, breaking Jianchen's train of thought. Jianchen turned towards the origin of the voice. He only saw an old man in hemp clothes with a clean cloth, wiping at the tables, chairs and walls not too far away. He actually made no sound at all. Jianchen immediately focused his gaze, staring deeply at the old man behind him. A sliver of shock flashed across his eyes. Before, he was in thought, but he remained vigilant of the unfamiliar surroundings. However, he did not sense when the old man had appeared at all. If the old man did not speak himself, perhaps Jianchen would still fail to notice that there was an additional person. "Youngster, you're quite impressive. I've stayed here for so many years, and I've seen plenty of Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. Though, basically all of them were over 100 years in age. You're the only one who's reached Class 6 in your 20s. The old man spoke extremely slowly. His old voice actually carried a powerless feeling, making him seem deficient in a vital energy of life. Jianchen stood up from the ground and clasped his hands at the old man. "Yang Yutian greets Senior." Jianchen was unable to see through the old man at all. In Jianchen's eyes, he seemed to be an extremely normal old man, without any irregularities. However, Jianchen was not so naive to believe so, and instead felt that the old man was even more profound. This old man is at least a 7th heavenly layer saint ruler, or even beyond that. Jianchen estimated to himself. This was because if 7th heavenly layer saint rulers wanted to conceal themselves, they could do something similar to the old man. Yang Yutian, practicing radiant arts is not hard, but what's hard is converting radiant saint force. Before, basically all the new Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters would spend several years, or even decades in fully grasping the method to convert Radiant Saint Force. It cannot be achieved so quickly. You should take the book and go to a room for seclusion upstairs, just in case you break things in here. The old man said weakly, like someone at death's door. Since the very start, he focused on doing his own things, without even glancing at Jianchen. Jianchen clasped his hands at the old man, and then returned the book back to where he took it from on the bookshelf. Afterwards, he went upstairs, planning on going into the rooms for seclusion mentioned by the old man to continue his comprehension. There were quite a few rooms upstairs, each with their own small, wooden door. Behind the door was a small room encased in a barrier. Not only did the barrier possess great defense, it could block out all sounds as well, allowing people to practice inside without any interruptions. Jianchen looked around and discovered that many of the rooms had a piece of communication jade hung on their doors. It meant that the rooms were already taken. Jianchen found an empty room and hung his piece of communication jade onto the door, before entering it to continue his comprehension of converting Radiant Saint Force. In the blink of an eye, Jianchen had already stayed in the tower for half a month. In that time, Jianchen did not leave the room at all, focusing all his energy practicing radiant arts. Jianchen also constantly fed the White Tiger heavenly resources, allowing it to strengthen by quite a lot. Inside the room for seclusion, Jianchen sat on the icy floor peacefully. His hands were on his knees and in front of him, a shield glowing with soft light hung in the air. The shield was completely solid and seemed like a big white rock. Jian Chen made a small gesture with his hand and the shield immediately hovered slowly towards Jian Chen. Jian Chen gently smacked the shield and a shield immediately gave out a deep sound. Jian Chen could not help but have his lips curl into a slight smile. After half a month of hard study, he had finally grasped the method of converting Radiant Saint Force. At this very moment, he could already coalesce solid objects from Radiant Saint Force. That Radiant Saint shield from just then should be able to block attacks from Great Saint Masters, but it'll definitely break from Earth Saint Masters. Though, I can easily make the defense of this shield increase several times with my current ability. It should be able to block attacks from Heaven Saint Masters. Jian Chen mumbled to himself. Although Heaven Saint Masters, even when using Heaven-tier battle skills, struggled to injure his chaotic body, Jian Chen could not reveal his strength as a fighter in the City of God. If his identity was divulged, he would probably lose all the hard progress he had made, as well as face troubles from the Union, because he already knew some secrets he should not know. I've already gotten a grasp of this Radiant Saint shield. I wonder if there's any more powerful defensive techniques. Jian Chen left the room which he had stayed for half a month, arriving before the bookshelf with the radiant arts from before. He flipped through the books, one by one. The old man discovered by Jian Chen half a month ago was nowhere to be seen. Although there were several books on the shelf, most of them did not pique Jian Chen's interest and only a few of them were methods of practicing radiant arts. Radiant Saint Sword. Jian Chen picked up a thick book. After flipping through it, he learnt that it was an offensive radiant arte, able to coalesce Radiant Saint Force into a powerful, giant sword, which could be controlled by thought to attack. Jian Chen remembered the position of the book, before returning it to the shelf and continuing through the other books. Radiance Burst, Shape converted Radiant Saint Force into raindrops and used the power of thought to control and attack. Area of Effect. Radiant Saint Armor, transform Radiant Saint Force into a tough but flexible substance and coalescing a layer of it on the body, to protect caster. Radiant Saint, coalesce Radiant Saint Force to create a clone exactly the same as caster in the radius thought can extend to. Does not fear any attack. Soaring Technique, coalesce Radiant Saint Force under feet and soar in the air. Jian Chen read through the books on the shelf, one by one. As he read the details of each recorded technique, he felt more and more astonished. At this moment, Jian Chen had already completely abandoned the notion that Radiant Saint Masters were harmless and possessed no method of attack. Radiant Saint Master could become just as strong as fighters, just that this strength would only appear in the later stages, as all the radiant arts he had seen required at least class 5 to practice. Also, it would be several times more difficult compared to fighters. Chapter 738, Supreme Radiant Arte, God's Descent. This time, Jian Chen did not immediately go into seclusion to comprehend the techniques like last time. Instead, he memorized the contents of every single book, until he could recite them backwards. This trip to the Radiant Saint Tower was quite a big harvest for Jian Chen. He obtained the wondrous Radiant Arts, which allowed his abilities as a Radiant Saint Master to greatly increase. Not only did it include powerful regenerative abilities, even his attack increased greatly. Although he possessed the chaotic body which made these so-called Radiant Arts seem useless, they could be useful to him under some particular circumstances. Jian Chen spent an entire day memorizing all the Radiant Arts that he had read through. Shortly afterwards, he suddenly gazed towards the very top of the bookshelf. At the top, there were 3 thick books, but each of them were covered in a layer of Radiant Saint Force which formed a seal, preventing others from reading it. Jian Chen knew that the 3 thick books were definitely the most valuable objects on the bookshelf. He extended his hands to grab it, but discovered that the layer of Radiant Saint Force around the books actually prevented his hand from approaching it in astonishment. He was unable to touch the books at all. Jian Chen focused his attention and pondered for a while. A ball of dense radiant saint force suddenly appeared in his hand, reaching towards the 3 books once again. However, it was exactly the same as last time. His hand was blocked once again, unable to approach the books sealed within. Sir, those 3 books cannot be read by us Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, because the radiant arts inscribed within can only be practiced by Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. Moreover, those 3 books are extremely different from other books. They cannot be opened at all. The only way to read the contents is by extending your thought into it. Suddenly, a voice echoed from rather close by. A middle-aged man, also in white robes and with a blue badge, walked down from the floor of seclusion above. "Thank you, sir." Jian Chen examined the middle-aged man, before clasping his fist at him. He then followed what the middle-aged man had said, approaching the 3 books with his presence. When Jian Chen's presence approached the Radiant Saint Force seal, he encountered an extremely powerful resistance, preventing Jian Chen's presence from entering it. At the same time, the 3 books suddenly began to glow with a dazzling white light. This was the behavior of the seal being activated. Seeing that, the middle-aged man shook his head with a forced smile. "Sir, you should stop wasting your energy." Apparently, the seal for those radiant arts were cast down by a past president of the Union himself. Unless you are Class 7, it's absolutely impossible for you to break through the seal and access the restricted information. There's been plenty of Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters who've attempted again and again, but the outcome was all the same. No one can break through the seal. Jian Chen turned a deaf ear to the middle-aged man's words. He extended his presence with all his might, shaping it into a needle to attempt to break through the first book seal with great effort. The Radiant Saint Force seal on the first book trembled violently. It continued as such for several seconds, before the seal was finally broken through by Jian Chen. As a result, Jian Chen's presence also successfully entered the book. Immediately, a great pile of information surged violent into Jian Chen's mind, making him feel a slight throbbing pain. "What? You've actually broken through the seal?" The middle-aged man stared closely at Jian Chen. Wide-eyed, his face was filled with disbelief. For countless years, the seal of the 3 books could not be broken unless it was a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. Right now, he had just witnessed a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master break through it, so he was filled with disbelief. However, a gleam of light soon flashed past through the man's eyes. He thought, this is an extraordinary chance to see the radiant arte that can only be practiced by Class 7 people. The man did not hesitate at all, immediately sending forth a thought of his from the center of his eyebrows. It shot towards the book with the seal Jian Chen had broken through, like a lightning bolt. However, just when the man's thought approached the book, the seal immediately recovered, glowing with a dazzling white light to block the man's thought. The man did not give up. He continued to rush at the seal with all his might, but he still failed to break through the seal like Jian Chen in the end. He could only sigh helplessly and abandon the idea of seeing a Class 7 Radiant Arte. "Brother, what Radiant Arte was recorded in the book?" The middle-aged man looked towards Jian Chen. His gaze was fanatical and filled with admiration. Jian Chen did not speak, as he currently was eyes closed, digesting the large amount of information that had suddenly surged into his mind. A while later, Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes and a gleam of light flashed across his eyes. The information that surged into his mind indeed carried information for a Radiant Arte where only Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters could practice. The Radiant Arte's name was Judgment Sword, an extremely powerful Radiant Arte for attack. According to the records, a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master using the Radiant Arte could slaughter ordinary saint rulers. However, when Jian Chen learnt about the Radiant Arte, it was clearly useless, as he already possessed the strength to kill 5th heavenly layer saint rulers. Jian Chen then gazed towards the 2 remaining books. Without any hesitation, he sent forth his presence again, working on breaking through the seals of the 2 books. The middle-aged man gulped with difficulty. He stared fixedly at Jian Chen, who was tinkering away at the seals. He had decided that once the seal was broken, he would send forth his own thought to learn the details of the books. Radiant arts that could only be practiced by Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters would move any Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, as once they received the Radiant Arte, their strength would greatly increase. Even if they would not be able to display the power of the entire Arte, it was much stronger than other Radiant arts. An example would be a Heaven-tier battle skill in an Earth Saint Master's hand. Although the Earth Saint Master would struggle to display the skill's entire might, it was much stronger than Earth-tier battle skill. If an Earth Saint Master used a Heaven-tier battle skill, they could easily injure a Heaven Saint Master heavily, or even kill them. After a few seconds, the second book seal was also broken through by Jian Chen. The details of the book immediately flooded into Jian Chen's head. At the same time, the man who had spent quite some time waiting beside him immediately sent forth his thought to explore the book. However, the outcome was exactly the same as before. Just when his thought approached the book, the seal immediately recovered, blocking his thought outside. AI. The middle-aged man gave out a long sigh. He was filled with regret, and his gaze at Jian Chen also carried some envy. God's protection. Jian Chen mumbled softly. The Radiant Arte recorded within the second book was an extremely powerful defensive Arte. It would gather the surrounding Radiant Saint force and fuse it with the body, allowing the body to possess defense akin to steel, and also carried no side effects. The Radiant Arte was essentially made to fit for Radiant Saint Masters, making up for their fragile bodies. However, the only disadvantage was that the Arte could not be sustained for long periods of time, and that only Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters could cast it, varying in defense according to the caster's strength. Can this God's protection be used along with the chaotic body? Thinking up to there, a few ripples appeared in Jian Chen's calm mind. Afterwards, the seal of the third book was also broken through by Jian Chen. An extremely large amount of information flooded into Jian Chen's mind again, which caused him to close his eyes without any choice, as he worked hard in digesting the information. This time, the information was much more plentiful than the previous two. Jian Chen remained there for half an hour before digesting it all. In the moment he opened his eyes, joy flooded his face. He was extremely excited. The third book actually recorded a supreme Radiant Arte, God's Descent. God's Descent was the first heaven-defying Radiant Arte from the ancient times, a forbidden technique that could only be used by Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. This was because the Arte was extremely powerful. If a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master cast it, they could easily slaughter Saint Rulers, with 9th Heavenly Layer Saint Rulers being no exception. It could even compete with Saint Kings. From the information recorded in the book, Jian Chen learnt that in the ancient times, a Class 8 Radiant Saint Master used it and actually slaughtered 2 Saint Emperors. However, the price for using the Arte was extremely great. Every time it was cast, it would consume at least a century's worth of life. The ancient Class 8 Radiant Saint Master had only killed the 2 Saint Emperors by paying a price of a millennium of his life. Not only was the God's Descent the most powerful Arte Radiant Saint Masters could learn, it was also the supreme Radiant Arte classified as forbidden by all Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. Unless they were absolutely forced to, no one was willing to use it, because the price was just too great. Even though it was like that, it did not affect Jian Chen's joy for the skill. This was because he knew that once he mastered the Arte at Class 7, he possessed the strength to threaten 9th Heavenly Layer Saint Rulers. Even if it were a Saint King, he was able to stall some time even though he still would not be able to come out victorious. Jian Chen's heartbeat began to fasted. At this moment, he began to anticipate for a day where he could reach Class 7 sooner. Looking at Jian Chen's amazement, the middle-aged man beside Jian Chen definitely realized it was some outstanding Radiant Arte. After a slight hesitation, he finally gave into the powerful curiosity of his. With a smile, he asked kindly, "Brother, looking at your amazement, you've probably discovered some outstanding radiant arte. I wonder if you can divulge some of it to me. Then we can investigate the mysteries of this arte together and see whether we can find a method to use the arte with our current strength." Jian Chen completely understood the man's intentions. "Sir, if you want to comprehend the 3 radiant arts, you should go at it yourself. After all, the Union has rules. Without their permission, it is forbidden to teach the arts to anyone else. I cannot risk breaking this rule." Throwing down that, Jian Chen turned around and left. He directly went to the 2nd floor to go into seclusion. In the coming period of time, he had decided to completely comprehend the radiant arts he had grasped, especially the arte God's Descent, which had received much of Jian Chen's attention. Chapter 739, Extravagant Invitations from Everywhere. Within the Radiant Saint Tower, Jian Chen had already returned to the room he had originally taken up and devoted all his attention to the comprehension of radiant arts. After going into seclusion, the man who watched as Jian Chen obtained the 3 great arts stood obstinately outside Jian Chen's room, perhaps due to the fact that he was unwilling to let go of his brush with the 3 arts. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. Today, the wooden door to the room that had been tightly shut for 3 months finally opened slowly. The white-robed Jian Chen walked out, and on his shoulder, a small, snow-white tiger lay at ease. After 3 months of comprehension, Jian Chen had basically completely grasped the radiant arts. Only the 3 Class 7 arts remained at a beginner stage. Jian Chen had spent the most time for the 3 arts. However, no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to cast it completely. Under his full strength, he was able to cast it, but the strength was not as great as it was mentioned in the book, only as strong as a strike from a heaven saint master at most. Although Jian Chen's talent in practicing radiant arts approached Class 7, he was still a Class 6 radiant saint master in the end. Reaching such a step was already quite outstanding. If it was any other Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, they definitely would not be able to do what Jian Chen did. Jian Chen pushed open the small wooden door. With a single glance, he noticed the middle-aged man at the entrance to the room. The sounds from the wooden door disturbed the resting middle-aged man. He immediately snapped open his eyes, and when he discovered Jian Chen had left the room for seclusion, joy appeared in his eyes. He hurriedly stood up and smiled brightly, greeting Jian Chen in attempt to fawn on him. "Brother, you've finally come out. How did the comprehension of the 3 arts go? You must have benefited from it greatly." Jian Chen furrowed his eyebrows and said indifferently, "Sir, perhaps you're looking for me for something by waiting here?" "It's nothing, nothing at all. Brother, this humble one is Quan Yu Kai. I've been deeply moved by the talent and powerful abilities displayed by Brother, and I feel constant ripples of admiration towards Brother. So, I've been looking for the opportunity to have a talk with Brother. If Brother is not busy, Brother can give some directions to Quan Yu Kai. Quan Yu Kai will be forever grateful," the man said with a smile. Jian Chen furrowed his eyebrows once again. The man's behavior had made Jian Chen doubt whether he was a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master at all, actually without any pride a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master possessed. "Sir, apologies. I have matters to attend to, so I don't have the time to talk with you. Farewell." Jian Chen cupped his fist at Quan Yu Kai, before leaving immediately. He did not even glance back at Quan Yu Kai. "Oi oi oi, brother, don't leave so hurriedly. For you, I've waited outside for the entire 3 months. I haven't even left there for food, shits or piss. Even if it's not meritorious, it's still hard work. How can you treat me like this?" Quan Yu Kai immediately chased behind Jian Chen in a fashion that did not suit his status, chattering away beside Jian Chen. "Brother, you must be new. Otherwise, why haven't I seen you before? In order to make preparations for reaching Class 7 in a year, I've spent a total of 20 years in the Radiant Saint Tower, working hard at the comprehension of radiant arts, so I know nothing about what's happened between these 20 years. So I guess brother must be a new Class 6 Radiant Saint Master who's broken through in the past 20 years. Am I correct? Brother, how old are you? What should I call you, and what clan are you from? Brother, radiant arts are extremely profound, the only method in which Radiant Saint Masters can attack. I've lived for over 300 years. I reached Class 5 when I was in my 50s. Because my talent was not bad, I was taught radiant arts by the Union in advance, so I've spent close to 300 years in researching radiant arts. Although I still haven't reached the apex, my achievements are quite great. If brother needs anything, I can make an exception and pass on all this experience and insights to you. Quan Yukai chattered away patiently by Jian Chen, completely ignoring his cold gaze. His shamelessness made Jian Chen doubt whether he was a revered Class 6 Radiant Saint Master several times. Jian Chen left the Radiant Saint Tower, completely ignoring Quan Yotsai's pesterings, and went downstairs. Yang Yutian. Suddenly, a voice sounded. It was the fifth elder who had held Jian Chen's core member ceremony, walking over from the distance. Beside the fifth elder was a sturdy middle-aged man. A wisp of undetectable coldness flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. However, his expression remained unchanged, purposely clasping his hands at the fifth elder courteously. Yang Yutian greets the fifth elder. Quan Yukai greets the fifth elder. Quan Yukai, who had followed Jian Chen out of the tower, also clasped his hands at the fifth elder. Shortly afterwards, he shot a glance at Jian Chen and laughed. So you're called Yang Yutian. Even if you don't tell me, I know your name. The fifth elder arrived in front of Jian Chen and looked at him with a kind smile. Yang Yutian, every core member of the Union can request the Union to send a fighter to protect him. The President has paid particular great attention to you, so he's called on Mr. Yang Ling to protect you. Mr. Yang Ling is a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master, and also knows a Heaven tier battle skill. He is extremely powerful in battle. If he protects you, no one in the City of God will be able to harm you. The large man beside the fifth elder clasped his hands at Jian Chen and said with a low voice, Yang Ling greets Mr. Yang Yutian. I thank the fifth elder and the president for their concern. Jian Chen said. The fifth elder chuckled and said, Yang Yutian, how can you call him president? You should call him master. Jian Chen could not help but smile. The fifth elder is extremely correct. Alright, Yang Yutian, I won't take up any more of your time. I just happen to have some matters I need to deal with, so I shall be leaving first. Also, there's still another month until the competition between strong Radiant Saint Masters. When the time comes, you have to participate and win a position in the top 10. Only with that can you obtain an opportunity at breaking through to Class 7. The fifth elder said to Jian Chen. Afterwards, he turned around and left, without even waiting for Jian Chen's reply. As soon as the fifth elder left, Quan Yukai arrived beside Jian Chen and asked, Oi, Yang Yutian, is it true that the president is actually your master? Quan Yotsai's gaze was filled with disbelief. Jian Chen did not pay any attention to Quan Yukai. He stared calmly as the fifth elder's figure while he thought for a while, before leaving. As for Yang Ling, he remained a step behind, following closely. Just when Jian Chen left the headquarters of the Union, a dozen or so people immediately surrounded him from all directions. A hint of disdain flashed across Yang Ling's eyes, who stood behind Jian Chen. However, he soon recovered his composure, as he already identified the people and knew that they did not come to harm Jian Chen. Are you perhaps Sir Yang Yutian? The dozen people rushed in front of Yang Yutian, and asked the same question with extremely courteous attitudes. I am indeed Yang Yutian. I wonder who you all are. Jian Chen said calmly. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am a member of the Zhou family, one of the 8 great clans. I have come representing my master to invite Master Yang Yutian to visit the estate. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am a member of the Ho clan, one of the 8 great clans. I have come representing my master to invite Master Yang Yutian to visit the estate. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am a member of the Sar clan, one of the 8 great clans. I have come representing my master to invite Master Yang Yutian to visit the estate. Esteemed Master Yang Yutian, I am a member of the dozen people all declared their identities. Other than 8 of them who came from the 8 great clans of the City of God, the rest of them originated from second-rate clans. Their intentions were all the same, to invite Jian Chen to visit their clan. This can't be, all of the renowned 8 clans of the City of God have come. Brother Yang Yutian, so you're so well received. This is unfair. I, Quan Yu Kai, am also a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, but why haven't I ever been so well received? Perhaps the outside world has changed in the 20 years I stayed in the Radiant Saint Tower? Quan Yu Kai said unhappily beside Jian Chen with an resentful expression. Jian Chen frowned slightly and called out, since your master want to see me so much, why haven't they come personally? This, all the people began to hesitate, and the 8 people from the great clans even furrowed their brows slightly. To them, this Yang Yutian was just too arrogant. The 8 great clans could not be compared to the second or third-rate clans. It was still not enough for their masters to come personally just for a slightly talented Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Whatever. Since your masters want to see me, I'll see them. Tell your masters that in 3 days, I, Yang Yutian, will reserve the most famous floating restaurant on Fragrance River outside the city. If they don't want to come, I will not force them. Jian Chen said, completely disregarding the 8 great clans. Yang Yutian, this isn't very great. Master Ho is the patriarch of the Ho clan. His status is clearly some else, incomparable to the second-rate clans. One person said unhappily. Then Master Ho can choose to not come. I am not forcing anyone. Jian Chen directly replied coldly, without showing any concern for the person's dignity. Now that he knew radiant arts, he feared nobody unless saint rulers personally came. The person's face became ugly. He said with a slightly deep voice, I will report what Master Yang Yutian has said exactly as it is to Master Ho. Farewell. After the person from the Ho clan left, the people from the other 7 great clans also bid farewell to Jian Chen. Witnessing Jian Chen's attitude towards the Ho clan, they all gave up on their resentful thoughts. They would rather return with exactly what Jian Chen had said than take a cold shoulder from Jian Chen and leave in dejection, avoiding taking any more losses. Chapter 740, Fragrance River. After the people of the 8 clans left, Quan Yu Kai said to Jian Chen with an expression of respect, Brother Yang Yutian, you really are impressive. Not even showing respect to the 8 great clans. You're the most impressive Class 6 Radiant Saint Master I've seen. I admire you, I really do. Yang Ling stood indifferently behind Jian Chen, carrying out his duty of protecting Jian Chen attentively. As for Jian Chen not showing respect towards the 8 clans, he felt that it was entirely logical, as if it should have turned out that way. Ignoring Jian Chen's talent, his status as the disciple of the Union's president already allowed him to stand on equal ground with Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. The 8 clans really did not have the right to be arrogant before him. Jian Chen ignored Yuan Yu Kai and found a luxurious carriage on the street. After discussing the price with the driver, he climbed aboard. Yang Ling followed closely behind Jian Chen, and sat quietly with his eyes closed beside Jian Chen. He did not say anything. Brother Yang Yutian, wait for me. Quan Yu Kai also crawled into the carriage shamelessly, sitting with Jian Chen while he giggled. Jian Chen furrowed his brows slightly and stared at Quan Yu Kai unhappily. Why are you following me? Quan Yu Kai did not even become red-faced. He only chuckled, Brother Yang Yutian, when we're together, we can talk at any time. This is an extremely rare opportunity for both of us. Also, in the Radiant Saint Master competition in a month's time, we'll definitely both make it into the top 10 if we're together, and will easily obtain a chance for reaching Class 7. Quan Yukai, I know your intentions are for the 3 Radiant Arts. Though, you should give up on that notion. You should know the rules of the Union. Those 3 arts can only be obtained by yourself. I won't tell you about them. Jian Chen slowly closed his eyes and no longer said any more. He knew that the reason why Quan Yukai followed him was most probably for the 3 Radiant Arts that could only be practiced by Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters. Quan Yukai chuckled, Brother Yang Yutian, you see, the competition is getting closer and closer. Also, the rule of the Union is only that Radiant Arts cannot be given to outsiders. There's nothing preventing core members from exchanging it with each other. The competition is getting closer by the day. If we both get a hold of the 3 arts, we'll have a greater chance at entering the top 10. So, don't you see? Quan Yukai rubbed his hands, staring at Jian Chen enthusiastically. Jian Chen sat close-eyed in the bumpy carriage, resting, as if he did not hear what Quan Yukai had said at all. The people of the 8 clans returned to their clans very soon, passing on what Jian Chen had said to their owners, without changing a single word of it. At this moment, the white-robed Master Ho slowly stood up from his seat in the Ho estate. The sliver of a cold smile appeared on his face. Yang Yutian actually wants us, people of the 8 great clans, to meet on the floating restaurant of Fragrance River. How pretentious. Whatever, I'll go to it in 3 days. Let's see if this Yang Yutian's abilities are as exaggerated as the rumors. In the Qing family, one of the 8 great clans, a refined, middle-aged man sat on a bed in a luxurious room. He said with a smile, this Yang Yutian is rather interesting. Originally, it was me who invited him to the most renowned floating restaurant on Fragrance River, and now he's actually invited me. I just wonder what type of person he is. I hope he does not disappoint me. In other luxurious building, a ruddy old man sat cross-legged on a round cushion. He too said with a smile, this Yang Yutian's actually invited the people from the 8 clans to Fragrance River. It's a little arrogant, though he indeed has the right. Whatever, I'll go in 3 days. Let's see what the 3rd disciple of the president is like. In a beautiful, scenic garden, a white-robed, middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance was currently walking through a sea of flowers. He said with a soft voice, a meeting in 3 days, on the floating restaurant of Fragrance River. Yang Yutian, you indeed have this right to invite the people from the 8 great clans, though I wonder what level in Radiant Arts you've reached, with 3 months of comprehension and your talent approaching Class 7. At the same time, different voices sounded in the remaining great clans. The carriage bolted down the wide street, and stopped outside a branch office of the Union in the end. Jian Chen exited the carriage, directly entering the building. Not only did each branch of the Radiant Saint Master Union provide tests for those below Class 4, it provided a safe residency for every single Radiant Saint Master. This was also where Lin Bai temporarily stayed. Jian Chen strided into the branch in his luxurious white robes and his blue badge. The large Yang Ling followed closely behind Jian Chen, constantly looking about with a stern gaze, ensuring Jian Chen's safety. As for Quan Yukai, he did not fall behind at all, following up shamelessly and walking beside Jian Chen. The appearance of 2 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters bearing blue badges in a branch office immediately caused a commotion. All the Radiant Saint Masters and fighters Jian Chen passed by looked at the 2 of them with admiration and respect, but no one dared to go up and talk to them. An old man with a green badge quickly ran over from the distance. He first bowed courteously towards Jian Chen and Quan Yukai, before opening his mouth to speak. Esteemed Radiant Saint Masters, this lowly one is the vice manager of this branch. I wonder if I may be of help to the 2 sirs. The vice manager does not need to be so polite. Is Lin Bai here? Jian Chen said amiably with a smile. He's here, he's here, he's here. In the past few years, Lin Bai has always stayed here. Please proceed to the guest room up ahead and wait for a moment, I'll go call Lin Bai right now. The vice manager said, making a gesture for the two to sit down. No need, we'll wait here. Jian Chen crossed his arms and stood there. Very soon, Lin Bai in white clothes quickly walked out from inside the branch. Beside Lin Bai were his two personal bodyguards. Brother Yang Yutian, I just know you would come and find me. Other than my master, you're the only other Class 6 Radiant Saint Master Lin Bai, no. From quite far away, Lin Bai laughed aloud, from the bottom of his heart. Jian Chen revealed a smile. He had favorable opinions towards Lin Bai. Not to mention that fact that Lin Bai was an honest and reliable person, just because he had helped Jian Chen resolve the small problem with the Lei family was enough for Jian Chen to feel grateful. Uncle Lin Bai, I haven't seen you in 3 months. I hope you've been well, said Jian Chen with a smile. Brother Yang Yutian, it's better if you just call me Lin Bai and drop the uncle. Lin Bai said with a forced smile, before looking at Quan Yu Kai who was beside Jian Chen soon after. He quickly glanced past the blue badge of Quan Yotsai's chest and a sliver of respect immediately appeared on his face. He asked, Brother Yang Yutian, I wonder who this esteemed Class 6 Radiant Saint Master is? Quan Yu Kai glanced past the badge on Lin Bai's chest, and a sliver of arrogance immediately appeared on his face. He said, I'm Quan Yu Kai, a friend of Brother Yang Yutian. So you're called Lin Bai? Alright, if you stick with us, we'll guarantee that you'll successfully reach Class 6 and if you encounter any problems with Radiant Arts in the future, feel free to come and find me. Quan Yu Kai boasted without any shame, as if he had an extremely great accomplishment in Radiant Arts. Lin Bai chuckled and clasped his hands at Quan Yu Kai, when the time comes, perhaps I really will need to trouble Master Quan Yu Kai for some directions. Quan Yu Kai crossed his arms and raised his head slightly, and looked at the ceiling of the building. He carried an air of self-importance and said, Small matter. If you encounter any difficulties, feel free to come look for me. For Yang Yutian's sake, I'll make an exception and help you for free. There is nothing that I, Quan Yu Kai, cannot handle regarding Radiant Arts. As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to remember something. His air of self-importance instantly disappeared and glanced carefully at Jian Chen. He added, of course, other than the 3 Radiant Arts that only Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters can practice. Uncle Lin Bai, don't listen to him talk nonsense. He's just blathering, trying to trick people. You mustn't believe him. Jian Chen could not put up with it any longer and left the branch office with Lin Bai. Oi, Yang Yutian, how can you look down at me? I, Quan Yu Kai, am extremely famous. I'm not as deplorable as you've described. Quan Yu Kai was filled with recalcitrance, speaking unhappily next to Jian Chen. The vice manager stared dumbfoundedly as the figures of the 3 people departed, until they had disappeared from his sights. Only then did he return to his senses. He mumbled to himself, Quan Yu Kai, that person's actually Quan Yu Kai. I heard that 100 years ago, Quan Yu Kai once battled the person who placed 7th in the 10 Great Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, and the outcome was a draw. Perhaps he's that Quan Yu Kai? Afterwards, Jian Chen continued to go strolling through the various large stores of the City of God under Lin Bai's lead, in hopes of finding materials for the azulate swords. However, the outcome caused Jian Chen great disappointment in the end. After 3 consecutive days of rushing about, he did not find anything. 3 days later, Jian Chen bid farewell to Lin Bai. With Yang Ling and Quan Yu Kai, he arrived at a transportation stop in the city. After spending 2 class for monster cores, he left the city through the space gate. The City of God was one of the 7 capitals of the Tianyuan continent. It took up an extremely large area, and it would take a day and night's worth of travel to go to any city gate in any direction from the center. As a result, there were a few places in the city where saint kings of the past had erected space gates. The space gates of the City of God were slightly different from the space gate of the Qinhuang Kingdom. It was open all year round, and had already existed for countless years. The space gates were each powered by a wondrous formation that absorbed the energy of the world, not requiring Class 5 monster cores to be activated. As a result, using the space gates in the City of God only required a fee of a single Class 4 monster core. Jian Chen and the other two left the City of God through the space gate, before hailing a carriage to go directly to Fragrance River, 10 kilometers away. Fragrance River was an extremely beautiful scenic place, and had already existed for countless years. Apparently, when the City of God was first founded in the ancient times, the river was a chasm split open by a peerless saint emperor. The chasm was around 30 meters wide with a bottomless depth, and surrounded the entire city. Afterwards, due to the accumulation of rain, it slowly filled up the chasm. In the end, the chasm essentially turned into a moat for the City of God, while the river water carried a slight fragrance. As a result, the chasm split open by a saint emperor in the ancient times slowly became a beautiful, scenic place outside the City of God, and was named Fragrance River. Chapter 741, Killing Intent on the Ferry. 1. As the setting sun passed down in the sky, dusk was left behind. It was already evening. Outside the City of God, one of the capitals of the continent, it was yet another lively night by Fragrance River. On the two river banks, 30 meters apart, hung many festive lanterns of yellow and green, while many people strolled leisurely about along the riverbanks. There were plenty of young couples talking about love beside the river. On the surface of the river, there were various floating restaurants of different sizes, slowly traveling through the water with various colored lanterns strewn over them. Sweet melodies and elegant sounds of zither originated from the floating restaurants, and echoed across the entire river. Sometimes, the loud conversations of a few aristocrats could be heard from the ferries. At the largest dock on Fragrance River, there was a huge ferry, around 300 meters in length. It was docked quietly there, like a huge beast from antiquity. On it were plenty of multicolored lanterns, dyeing the ferry an assortment of colors. It was extremely entrancing. Near the dock, there were over 100 sailors and servants in uniforms, who stood sternly in 2 rows, as if they were waiting for something. With such a huge ferry docked there and the great formation from the people, it was rather rare. As a result, it caused the passers-by to all glance at it, and point at the giant ferry and discuss it. Isn't that the largest and most luxurious floating restaurant, the Inky Stratus? Why has it stopped there? And why is there such a grand reception? This is quite rare. Tonight, the Inky Stratus has been reserved by someone. Otherwise, why would they be wasting time and not making money by stopping here for nothing? The Inky Stratus is the most luxurious, as well as the most expensive floating restaurant. I heard that eating a meal there costs something equivalent to several months' worth of expenditures for ordinary people. Just which wealthy person reserved the entire Inky Stratus? Just when everyone was pointing and discussing the ferry, a luxurious carriage bolted over from the distance. It stopped slowly close to the dock, and shortly afterwards, 3 people got off it. Of the 3 people, 2 of them wore long, white robes with slender statures, and bore a shiny blue badge on their chests. As for the other person, he was a large, built man in tight, black clothing. The 3 of them were Jian Chen, Quan Yukai, and the 6th Cycle Heaven Saint Master that the Union had sent to protect Jian Chen, Ong Ling. With the appearance of the 2 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, Jian Chen and Quan Yukai, an intense hubbub immediately appeared in the crowd that had gathered nearby. They all looked away from the ferry, towards Jian Chen and Quan Yukai. Deep respect and admiration appeared in their eyes, along with some jealousy. Jian Chen and the other 2 ignored the sounds of discussions from the surroundings, and directly walked towards the huge ferry docked right ahead. A beautifully dressed middle-aged woman immediately walked over slowly to Jian Chen's group from in front of the ferry, and courteously bowed to them. He said, "Esteemed Radiant Saint Masters, the most famous floating restaurant, the Inky Stratus, has already completed its preparations. Please board the ferry." With that, the middle-aged beauty stepped to the side and made an inviting gesture towards Jian Chen's group. Jian Chen's gaze paused on the huge ferry. He said calmly, "Other than those who are needed, let the remaining people stay here, to welcome the 8 great clans of the City of God, as well as some other renowned clans." As soon as she heard the 8 great clans of the City of God, a shock immediately flashed across the middle-aged woman's eyes, and her expression became even more courteous. She said, "Esteemed Radiant Saint Master, this servant will definitely carry out your orders." Jian Chen's group of 3 strided into the ferry. As they passed by the 100 or so people, all of them bowed simultaneously towards Jian Chen and exclaimed, "We invite the Radiant Saint Master to board the ferry." Jian Chen paused slightly in his steps, and he furrowed his eyebrows. He who always preferred to keep a low profile clearly was not too used to such a treatment. However, he recovered soon after. He disappeared into the ferry. Jian Chen had already reserved the most famous and most luxurious ferry, the Inky Stratus, 2 days ago. It took up quite a lot of money, but compared to his wealth which could rival countries, it was insignificant. After Jian Chen's group disappeared into the ferry, there was another hubbub of discussion on the riverbank. However, not long after the hubbub began, the hurried sounds of gallops echoed in the distance once again. It was a luxurious carriage with over 20 large men on Class 5 magical beasts escorting it, quickly galloped over from the city. It stopped at the entrance to the dock very soon, and on the carriage, there was a banner waving in the air, and it bore the word Cheng. "Isn't that a carriage from the Cheng family, one of the 8 great clans of the City of God? And those guards on the Class 5 magical beasts, they must be the elites of the Chang family. Since the person in the carriage requires to be escorted by the elites of the family, his status must be extremely special." Immediately, several people began to gossip and discuss, and revealed a light of deep interest in their eyes. At this moment, the carriage door opened. A middle-aged man in long white robes, bearing a similar blue badge, climbed down from the carriage, before entering the ferry along with an old man. Not long after the middle-aged man entered the ferry, the hurried sounds of another carriage echoed in the distance once again. This time, it was a luxurious carriage escorted by several dozen large men in golden armors. In the end, it too stopped at the entrance to the docks, and an old man in embroidered robes climbed down from the carriage. Under the protection of 2 large, middle-aged men, he strode into the ferry. "That's the carriage of the Zhou family, one of the 8 great clans of the City of God. Who would have thought that they've come too?" Some people recognized the identity of the group of people and immediately cried out softly in surprise. Suddenly, a scorching wave of heat rolled in from the distance, as if the surrounding air was on fire, and caused the temperature of the river bank to rise. "It's the Fire God clan, and the head of the 8 great clans. Even the people from the Fire God clan have come." There were several immediate exclamations of surprise from the crowd. There seemed to be a burning red cloud in the murky distance. Over 20 people on Class 5 magical beasts escorted a carriage. The people wore long, fire-red robes and gave off a scorching, fire-attributed presence. As they approached the lake, the thin vapor over Fragrance River slowly turned to thick mist. The Fire God clan is extremely powerful. Not only are they the head of the 8 great clans, I heard that their strength is already approaching the rulers of the City of God, the Tsar family. I heard that there is an extremely lengthy history to the Fire God clan. That they are an ancient clan that had survived from the ancient times, and they say that in the ancient times, the Fire God clan was one of the most powerful forces on the Tianyuan continent. Just that with so many years, the clans slowly declined, and fell to such a level today. The Fire God clan always keeps a low profile in the City of God. Who would have thought that they'd come to Fragrance River in such a grand scale? I really wonder what will happen tonight. Quick, look, more have come. That's people from the Sar clan. I never thought that another of the 8 great clans would come. Heavens, those people are from the Madison clan. Just what is going on tonight? Half of the 8 great clans have actually come, aren't they from the Qilong clan? The Qilong clan of the 8 great clans have also come. Quick, looks, isn't that the carriage from the Ho clan? I never thought that even people from the Ho clan would come, and isn't that people of the Dekken clan? My God, people from all 8 great clans have actually gathered, and from the guards that have come, the people clearly possess quite some status in their clans. Just what day is it today? As the 8 clans gathered, it immediately caused quite a large commotion at Fragrance River. Very soon, the news of the 8 great clans gathering at Fragrance River spread like wildfire. Even the smaller fairies floating about in the river could not help themselves but grow slightly closer, and even the zither sounds and sweet songs reverberating on the surface of the river became quieter. As the people of the 8 clans all entered the ferry, the Inky Stratus, which had been docked there for quite some time, it also began to leave slowly. It broke the surface of the water, and slowly floated towards the center of the river. On the deck of the Inky Stratus, there were large round tables placed about, all already filled with exotic delicacies. Jian Chen said a few words to the people of the 8 clans, before they all sat down. I have long heard that Brother Yang Yutian possesses extraordinary talent, and reached class 6 despite only being 24, with talent in practicing radiant arts approaching class 7. In the beginning, I didn't believe it, but after seeing you two, I realized Brother Yang Yutian really is a dragon among men. Brother Yang Yutian must have gained much from 3 months of seclusion in the Radiant Saint Tower. The speaker was an old man, and a member of the Qilong clan. His status was extremely great, as he was also a class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Jian Chen chuckled, the old senior must be praising me. I've indeed made a few slight gains from the Radiant Saint Tower. My trip to the Radiant Saint Tower has overturned my understanding towards Radiant Saint Masters. What slight gains, it's clearly a huge harvest. Quan Yukai muttered to himself rather unhappily beside Jian Chen, as he disagreed with what Jian Chen had said very much. Even though Quan Yotsai's voice was relatively soft, it was heard by everyone there. They all immediately gazed towards Quan Yukai, especially some of the class 6 Radiant Saint Masters there. They all looked at Quan Yukai with a great jealousy. I have long heard Master Quan Yukai has raised his abilities of radiant arts to an extremely high level, and challenged the expert who ranked 7th of the 10 great Radiant Saint Masters, and it ended in a draw. After 100 years of hard work, Master Quan Yotsai's strength surely has increased by quite a lot. The speaker was an average-looking middle-aged man. His tone was relatively cold. He wore long, white robes with a blue badge on his chest. He was also a class 6 Radiant Saint Master. Quan Yukai chuckled, of course. 100 years ago, my strength was equal to Li Maxin, but after 100 years, Li Maxin definitely is no longer my opponent. Speaking up to there, Quan Yukai suddenly stared at the middle-aged man with an ill intention and giggled, Sar Lanka, you also hold the position in the 10 great class 6 Radiant Saint Masters, and you're ranked 6th. When we have time, why don't we exchange some pointer? An undetectable coldness flashed across the middle-aged man's eyes, but his expression remained unchanged. He said indifferently, perfect. When I have the time, we can properly exchange some pointers. Chapter 742, Killing Intent on the Ferry. 2. Jian Chen's gaze towards Quan Yukai carried some astonishment. He did not think that Quan Yukai, someone as thick-skinned as a pig and rather unreliable, would actually possess the strength to challenge the 10 great class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. Forced the first time, there was some change to Jian Chen's opinion of Quan Yukai. He could not help but believe what Quan Yukai had said to Lin Bai about how he had a rather great attainment in radiant art slightly, though it was only slightly. Noticing Jian Chen's change, Quan Yukai immediately revealed a smile that he believed to be enchanting and giggled at Jian Chen. "How is it, brother Yang Yutian? Do you finally believe it now?" "I, Quan Yukai, am not as deplorable as you've described. If you discuss matters with me, an esteemed Class 6 Radiant Saint Master, not only will you not suffer losses, it'll even benefit you extremely greatly at my expenses. Shouldn't you give this a serious consider?" Jian Chen shook his head with a slight smile. He did not say anything, though he thought to himself, this Quan Yukai really does harp on those three great radiant arts. 3 months ago, I heard that brother Yang Yutian has unprecedented talent and is a modern prodigy. Not only have you reached Class 6 at a young age of 24, your talent in practicing radiant arts is close to one of a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. Currently, it's getting closer and closer by the day to the fight for a chance at breaking through to Class 7. The elimination competition will begin in a month's time. I wonder how confident brother Yang Yutian is for obtaining a position in the top 10? A luxuriously robed old man said. He was the one in control for the Ho clan, Master Ho. He was also a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. The remaining members of the clans at the tables all cast their gazes towards Jian Chen. They clearly cared very much about the answer to the question. Hearing Master Ho's question, Quan Yukai immediately revealed a shocked expression. He stared fixedly at Jian Chen, clearly also astounded by Jian Chen's age and talent. However, he recovered soon after and thought to himself, no wonder this Yang Yutian can break through the seals to those three radiant arts, his talent for radiant arts actually approaches Class 7. Though, I wonder about his current strength and to what level he can use radiant arts. Jian Chen smiled, Master Ho is too kind. It was only because I was rather lucky that I reached Class 6 so quickly. However, in regards to the elimination battle in a month's time, I'm not confident that I will obtain a position in the top 10, but I will definitely give it my all. I, Cheng Jian, believe brother Yang Yutian will definitely enter the top 10. After all, Yang Yutian's talent for radiant arts is almost similar to a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master, exceeding all of us. I trust that placing within the top 10 is nothing difficult for brother Yang Yutian. Here, let us celebrate in advance for brother Yang Yutian in obtaining a place in the top 10 in the name of the Qing family, said the refined, middle-aged man of the Qing family as he raised his glass of wine towards Jian Chen. After drinking the wine, Chang Jian continued, brother Yang Yutian, I have a proposal. In the elimination battle a month away, why don't we work together? That way, both our chances at placing top 10 will greatly increase. I wonder how brother Yang Yutian feels about it. Brother Yang Yutian, Cheng Jian's proposal is pretty good. If we work together, our chances at the top 10 will greatly increase. As soon as Cheng Jian finished what he was saying, an old man spoke out. Master Ho began to laugh. Whenever it is the time of the elimination battle, the 8 great clans of the City of God will almost always work together. Brother Yang Yutian, why don't you work together with us? That way, the chance of survival inside will be much greater than when you are alone. Afterwards, the remaining people of different clans all spoke out to invite Jian Chen to join them. They knew that Jian Chen's future accomplishments would greatly exceed their own, just from looking at his talent. Jian Chen did not accept the invitations of the 8 clans. He hesitated for a while, and during that time, he could not help but remember the words spoken by the president, right now, the Holy Empire is not so peaceful, so it's best to avoid getting too close with organizations related to the 3 great clans. Thinking up to there, Jian Chen made his decision. He said apologetically to the people, I understand everyone has good intentions, but in the battle a month away, I do happen to have my own plans, so I am unable to be with everyone. What Jian Chen had said immediately caused many people at the tables to change in expression. Even the lively atmosphere seemed to freeze at that instant, and in the next moment, the deck of the ferry became abnormally quiet, that even the sound from a dropped needle could be heard clearly. A while later, the heavy atmosphere was finally broken. Brother Yang Yutian, you must consider well. Going by yourself is extremely dangerous, making it extremely difficult to place within the top 10 in the end. It was an old man who spoke up, and he came from the Fire God clan. Jian Chen rejected him without any hesitation. I thank everyone's good intentions, but I have already made up my mind, so there is no need to say any more. At the dining tables, the expressions of a few people became stern, while an undetectable silver of coldness flashed across the eyes of others. At this moment, the dozing white tiger on Jian Chen's shoulder suddenly opened its eyes, staring fixedly at the surface of the river. Suddenly, the calm river surface was broken. 30 people in dark clothing leapt out, lunging towards the tables at lightning speed as they flickered with colored lights from different attributed saint force. No one was spared, with Jian Chen, Quan Yukai and people of the 8 clans becoming their targets for attack. Protect Master Ho. Protect the young master. On the ferry, the guards of the 8 clans immediately sprinted onto the deck, retreating quickly and protecting their masters while rushing up to some of the dark-clothed people, engaging in intense battles. Fuck, around 30 Heaven Saint Masters. What a large scale. Quan Yukai cried out in alarm. A ball of white clouds formed below his feet, and he disappeared from the deck of the ferry in the blink of an eye. He fled faster than a rabbit. Of the 30-odd Heaven Saint Masters, around 20 of them went for the 8 clans, while the remaining dozen or so all went for Jian Chen. The 8 clans all possessed Heaven Saint Master guards who guarded their masters tightly, and retreated from the deck as they repelled the attacks from the dark-clothed men. All the people of the 8 clans displayed stern expressions. They had brought plenty of Earth Saint Master guards, but there were only a dozen or so Heaven Saint Masters, which was a great gap to the number of people trying to kill them. Not long after the battle began, the people of the 8 clans were slowly forced into the hold of the ship. There were also many guards of the 8 clans that had been injured from the attacks, covered in blood. Suddenly, a ball of dazzling light illuminated the pitch-black sky, and purged the sky of much of its darkness. A few highly regarded Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters of the clans all struck out, and each cast radiant arts from their hands towards the dark-clothed men. Currently, the people of the 8 clans had already been forced below the deck by the 20-odd assassins, while Jian Chen remained seated at the dining tables, perfectly calm and collected, while holding his head up high against the disaster. As for his surroundings, there were already a dozen or so men who had locked onto him, and currently approached him at lightning speeds. A powerful ripple of energy originated from behind him. 3 assassins approached Jian Chen first, and lunging at him. With their saint weapons glowing with a special attributed light, they were chock full of saint force. The corner of Jian Chen's lips curled into a mocking smile. He tilted his head and downed the glass of good wine. Without even looking backwards, he said softly, "Radiant Saint Shield." The surrounding Radiant Saint force began to gather around Jian Chen at an unbelievable pace, and formed a silvery shield with a diameter of a meter, blocking the strikes behind Jian Chen. Although the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters were battling against the assassins, they would always subconsciously glance past Jian Chen. When they witnessed how quickly Jian Chen had congealed the Radiant Saint shield, they were all astounded. Jian Chen's speed at pulling up Radiant Saint force was something they could not achieve even at full strength, and looking at Jian Chen's unfazed demeanor, he did not even seem to give it his all. This Yang Yutian really does possess talent for radiant arts that approaches Class 7. Just his speed of condensing a Radiant Saint shield is already much greater than us. Several Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters thought to themselves. At this moment, the saint weapons of the 3 Heaven Saint Masters simultaneously collided with Jian Chen's Radiant Saint shield, and carried along with the weapons a powerful ripple of energy. The Radiant Saint shield, completely condensed of Radiant Saint force, seemed like an extremely sturdy piece of steel. Each time it was struck it gave off a great loud clang, so deafening that it had become rather painful. Although the Radiant Saint shield had blocked the simultaneous attacks of the 3 Heaven Saint Masters, it was covered in a layer of spiderweb cracks. Shortly afterwards, Jianchen pointed gently towards the shield and it immediately shattered with a loud sound. It turned into countless small pieces of shrapnel, and shot towards the three Heaven Saint Masters at lightning speed like a white rain. The expressions of the three Heaven Saint Masters changed slightly. Vigorous saint force immediately surged from their bodies, and formed a barrier around their bodies to receive the shield shrapnel. The Radiant Saint shield can actually be used like that. I've really widened my understanding today. Brother Yang Yutian really is impressive. You actually discovered an attack like that. Quan Yukai stared fixedly at Jian Chen from the hold of the shift, and sighed with praise. But Brother Yang Yutian needs to receive the attacks of a dozen or so Heaven Saint Masters at the same time. Can he endure it? Should I help him out? Quan Yukai thought for a little before speaking. Never mind. Although Quan Yukai, indeed has some strength, I'm helpless against so many Heaven Saint Masters. And since Brother Yang Yutian seems so confident, let's just observe the situation first, and have a look at Brother Yang Yutian's strength in the meantime. Radiant Saint Sword. Jian Chen did not pause in his actions. Just as the Radiant Saint shield transformed into countless fragments and shot towards the three Heaven Saint Masters, a huge sword around 2 meters in length immediately condensed in front of him. With a swing of his hand, the giant sword became a white flash, and sped towards another black-clothed assassin. The assassin did not treat the Radiant Saint sword too importantly. To him, although Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters possessed a certain level of offense, it was still not enough to threaten him, much less a young man in his 20s. However, when the Radiant Saint sword collided with the Assassin Saint weapon, it immediately produced a great bang. The man's expression changed greatly, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, as he was knocked backward with great force by the Radiant Saint sword. Just a single Radiant Saint sword from Jian Chen had caused a powerful Heaven Saint Master to vomit blood and retreat. This had caused all the other assassins who surrounded Jian Chen to be surprised, and just stare at Jian Chen in disbelief. Impossible, since when did Radiant Saint sword become so powerful? An assassin could not control himself and exclaimed aloud. Chapter 743, Killing Intent on the Ferry. 3. Everyone be careful, this person's radiant arts are much more powerful than other Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. A 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master called out to alert his companions, before he used his full strength. As the great Radiant Saint force constantly surged into his Saint weapon, it also began to glow greatly, before he swung it at Jian Chen. An extremely great sword chi shot out from the Assassin's Saint weapon. It shot forwards like a lightning bolt, and carried a sliver of pressure that originated from the world. At the same time, another 4 assassins around Jian Chen swung their Saint weapons in a similar fashion. They all shot out a powerful sword chi at Jian Chen. Each sword chi carried slivers of pressure that originated from the world, which locked tightly onto Jian Chen. You even dare to make a fool of yourself with mere earth-tier battle skills. A sliver of disdain appeared on Jian Chen's face. He slowly unfolded his hands from his chest and called out, Radiant Saint Sword. Radiant Saint Shield. The surrounding Radiant Saint force quickly began to move violently. It gathered around Jian Chen's hands at an unbelievable speed, and formed into 4 Radiant Saint swords that radiated with soft light around Jian Chen's left hand, while a giant, 3-meter-wide shield appeared near Jian Chen's right hand. The scene caused the Class 6 Radiant Saint Master to stare wide-eyed once again. How is this possible? Yang Yutian actually condensed 4 Radiant Saint swords and a Radiant Saint shield together in such a short time. Master Ho was no longer able to remain calm. He stared dumbfoundedly at Jian Chen, as if he had just witnessed something impossible. Heavens! Brother Yang Yutian's strength is just too impressive. Not only can he simultaneously condense 4 Radiant Saint swords and a Radiant Saint shield, the speed it took him is several times greater than me. My God, just how does he do it? Quan Yotsai's mouth was agape, while the shock in his heart had already reached an unreturnable state. Brother Yang Yutian indeed is very powerful. With just a single hand, he's done something that completely surpassed all of us. Even the person who places first in the top 10 Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters probably can't cast 5 Radiant Arts at the same time to such a level. The refined, middle-aged man of the Cheng family sighed emotionally in his heart. His gaze towards Jian Chen was filled with shock and disbelief. Sar Lanka stared sternly at Jian Chen. His eyes flickered with a gleam of light and he said softly, "This Yang Yutian is much stronger than I've anticipated. What a pity that he's unwilling to join us. Once the battle starts, we'll become enemies sooner or later." The old man from the Fire God clan said softly, also with a gleam of light flickering in his eyes. Hearing that, a cold light flashed across Sar Lanka's eyes and he said no more. Swish. 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 With 4 ear-piercing whooshes, the 4 Radiant Saint swords formed streaks of white light, that rushed towards the 4 Heaven Saint Masters and their Earth-tier battle skill sword Qi. Bang! The 4 Radiant Saint swords collided with the 4 sword Qis, and immediately produced a great sound of collision. As they slammed into each other, the Radiant Saint swords and the sword Qi actually collapsed at the same time mid-air. It formed a violent energy which rippled in all directions. It caused the largest ferry of Fragrance River, the Inky Stratus, to rock from side to side, while the waves created reached several meters high. The dark sky was completely illuminated from the white light given off by the Radiant Saint swords as they collapsed. Jian Chen immediately used his right hand to block his chest. The Radiant Saint shield seemed to be pulled along by an invisible force, and it followed Jian Chen's right hand and moved from Jian Chen's side to right in front of him. As it floated there, it helped Jian Chen block the havoc-wreaking energy ripples. At the same time, a few remaining assassins flew in from behind Jian Chen, and swiped at him with their saint weapons at the same time. A cold light flashed across Jian Chen's eyes. The Radiant Saint shield remained in front of him, but he called out with a deep voice, "Radiance burst." As soon as he finished speaking, the Radiant Saint force in a radius of 5 kilometers immediately became violent. The originally gentle, sheep-like Radiant Saint force actually suddenly became explosive, like a vicious tiger, and it all gathering around Jian Chen in less than half a second. They became raindrop-sized balls of white light, and each carried a forceful energy, as if it was sharp sword Qi that was capable of piercing rock. At the same time, the Radiant Saint swords in the hands of the clan members quickly began to dim, and disappeared soon after. Afterwards, a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master cried out in astoundment, "How is this possible? All the Radiant Saint force in a radius of 5 kilometers has all disappeared." The Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters all revealed extremely astonished expressions, and they gazed at each other. The shock in their hearts had already reached a limit, they were not even able to speak anymore. All the Radiant Saint force in a radius of 5 kilometers had been sucked clean, so that even they were unable to continue casting Radiant Arts. They had lived for so long, yet this was something they had never encountered. Brother Yang Yutian, you're just too impressive. You've actually sucked up all the Radiant Saint force in the surrounding area, so that even other Radiant Saint Masters are no longer able to cast Radiant Arts. My admiration for you surges like the endless waves of the river. Brother Yang Yutian, from today onwards, you are my idol. Quan Yukai stared at Jian Chen in interest, and his face was covered with an expression of admiration. Jian Chen's expression was cold, as if he did not realize how great of an impact he was to the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters of the 8 clans. Cold light flickered in his eyes and a sharp but undetectable killing intent appeared. He called out with a deep voice, "Radiance burst, go." With Jian Chen's gesture, the countless points of light formed from Radiant Saint force surged at the assassins behind him, like a moth lunging at a fire. The powerful strength Jian Chen had displayed before was witnessed by all the black-clothed assassins, so even against such an underwhelming attack, they did not dare to be complacent at all. Vast amounts of radiant saint force immediately surged violently from their bodies, forming a thick barrier around them to block the attack from the points of light. At the same time, they swung their saint weapons constantly, and smashed the points of light. The specks of light formed from radiant saint force seemed insignificant, but each speck carried a powerful and sharp force. As soon as they collided with the saint weapons in the hands of the assassins, they gave out consecutive, metallic screeches. Arg! An assassin gave out a mournful cry. The specks of light had broken through his protection formed from saint force, piercing deeply into his body. The great pain caused him to cry out, "Help me," on impulse. Although the specks of light was blocked for the other assassins, the situation for them was not great either. The specks were just too densely packed, as numerous as rain. Many of the specks broke through the swings of their saint weapons, and collided with the barrier formed from radiant saint force, causing it to tremble greatly. This fucking thing is just too powerful. My protection from saint force can't hold much longer. It's going to fail soon. Retreat. An assassin with a shaking barrier cursed aloud. He gave up on this opportunity to attack Jian Chen, and quickly retreating backwards. Is this goddamn Radiant Saint Master Class 6 or Class 7? Why is he so overpowered? We actually can't get any closer to him. Several assassins all swore aloud. They were all forced back by Jian Chen's radiance burst, and were forced to give up on their attack and protect themselves. Do you just want to retreat like this? How can it be so easy? A sneer formed on Jian Chen's face, and with a deep voice, "Radiant Saint Sword." As soon as he finished speaking, 3 white streaks of light suddenly began to flash, as they quickly flew towards the ferry and struck at one of the retreating assassins. He actually condensed a Radiant Saint Sword from over 5 kilometers away, and then got them to fly in. When the Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters witnessed what was happening, they were immediately dumbfounded. This Yang Yutian really is so skilled to be able to do such a maneuver. He condensed a Radiant Saint Sword over 5 kilometers away, and then controlled the swords to fly in from so far away. Unbelievable. The Class 6 Radiant Saint Master from the Cheng family mumbled at a slight loss. As for Sar Lanka, his expression became extremely ugly, while the complexions of the members from other clans fluctuated. Be careful from behind. An assassin discovered the 3 Radiant Saint swords flying in from the distance and immediately cried out to warn his companions. Meanwhile, his eyes were wide open as he stared at the 3 faraway Radiant Saint swords with disbelief. The 3 swords actually flew in from over 5 kilometers away. Hearing the cry of warning, the other black-clothed assassins all noticed the Radiant Saint swords flying in from behind. Each was greatly surprised. The 3 Radiant Saint swords directly shot towards one person each. The swords possessed strength equivalent to the full-powered blow from a Heaven Saint Master. As the first sword collided with the person's saint weapon, it knocked him backwards quickly, while he produced a muffled cough from his throat. He was already heavily injured. Before the person could even return to his senses, a second sword shot towards him. Although it was successfully blocked by the person, he spat out a mouthful of blood onto his hand, which held the saint weapon that had already become numb from the clash. His right hand with the radiant weapon drooped powerlessly. Closely afterwards, the 3rd Radiant Saint Force sword attacked the heavily injured man, basically right after the second sword. It pierced the man's chest, and when it had entered halfway, it suddenly exploded, and blasting the assassin's body to shreds. Even his soul was unable to escape, instantly killing him. A Heaven Saint Master had fallen by the hands of a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master just like this, not to mention the fact that it was under a situation of many against one, attacking from all directions. After killing a Heaven Saint Master, Jian Chen did not show any happy emotions. His expression remained just as cold, while powerful killing intent exuded from his eyes. He then pointed his right hand at the sky with his head held up, and gazed at the pitch-black sky, Judgment's sword. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.